Hey guys, tonight we drift far north, where the sea gnaws at the land and winter never really ends. You stand there, boots sinking into black sand, watching icy waves crash against the wind-beaten coast of Norway. The air is so sharp it cuts your breath in half. You can almost taste the salt freezing on your lips. The sky above looks bruised, purple and grey, and the only warmth comes from a smear of fire flickering somewhere down the beach. You're about to learn how the Vikings, those restless wanderers of the north, managed to sleep here when the world itself seemed to shiver. You probably won't survive this. Not with that thin blanket and your modern thermostat habits. But that's fine. Tonight's about imagination, not frostbite. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sand under your feet feels like crushed glass. The wind shrieks like something alive, whirling snow and salt into your face until your eyelashes bead with ice. You trudge toward the glow ahead, an orange pulse beneath a canopy of smoke. The Viking settlement sits half buried in frozen soil, its longhouses crouching like tired beasts, their roofs draped in sod and frost. Smoke escapes through slits in the turf, rising like the sighs of 1,000 winters. You pull your cloak tighter and imagine arriving here 1,000 years ago, when men with beards iced white by the sea came home from raids clutching silver, amber, or sometimes just stories. They called these coasts home not because they were kind, but because they were theirs. You can picture it. Warriors hauling their ships onto shore, their oars frozen to their calloused hands. Behind them, women and children rush out with torches, guiding them back to warmth and safety, two things that always depended on firewood and luck. There's a strange comfort in how everything smells. Tar, salt, smoke and wet wool. You catch the faint sound of laughter from within a longhouse, muffled by thick turf walls. The Vikings built these halls with timber ribs and sod layers packed so tightly they could almost hold heat like a sponge. Archaeologists still marvel at their design. Primitive yet smart enough to trap warmth and shed wind. Historians, though, still argue whether those turf roofs were more common along coastal Norway or if they became popular later, once the Norse settled in Iceland's harsher climate. You imagine a scholar hunched over a firelit table somewhere, still debating the exact shape of warmth in the 9th century. You step closer to the fire pit at the village's edge. Men in wool tunics stand around it, rubbing their hands and muttering to the gods of warmth, Thor perhaps, or the hearth spirit they believe keeps frost demons out. One man spits into the fire for luck. Another ties a bit of iron to a cord and hangs it over the flames. A charm, he says, to make sure the smoke rises straight. Odd custom, you think, but maybe it worked. Some say Vikings carried small charms of iron or bone in their pockets to keep spirits of the cold at bay. The fire pops, sending embers spiraling into the air like tiny stars escaping gravity. You hold your palms to the glow, feeling the ancient logic of heat. Burn something, live another night. It's so simple, so fragile. Behind you, the wind roars again, and you glance toward the Black Sea, its waves boiling white beneath the moon. Somewhere out there, the skeleton of a longship creaks, half buried in ice. You can almost hear it groaning like an old man dreaming of younger days. The cold tightens around you, but you keep watching the fire. This is what survival looked like. No roaring furnaces, no down comforters. Just people and flame standing stubbornly against the dark. The thought soothes you in an odd way. The Vikings didn't conquer the cold. They learned to share the same bed with it, to sleep beside its teeth and not flinch. You close your eyes and let the sound of the sea blend with the fire's hiss, your breath fogging in slow rhythm. The night is long, but the story's only just begun. You push open the longhouse door and smoke spills out like a living thing. It stings your eyes, wraps around your throat, and yet, strangely, it feels like home. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of pine resin, animal breath, and something sour sweet, like damp wool trying to dry by the fire. You blink through the haze until the room begins to take shape. A great wooden hall, its rafters arched like a ship turned upside down. The walls gleam dark with soot and age, and the ceiling seems to drip with the ghosts of 100 winters. You step inside, and the first thing that hits you is warmth. Not the gentle warmth of modern comfort, but a wild, uneven heat that comes in waves. The central hearth crackles, flames licking through a pit lined with stones. smoke twisting up toward a small hole in the roof. The Vikings didn't have chimneys. The smoke lingered, creeping along the rafters before seeping out through the gaps. You can almost hear the sigh of the wood as it absorbs the heat, storing it like a secret. Men and women move around you, wrapped in wool tunics and fur-edged cloaks. The floor is packed earth, uneven and littered with bits of straw. A few hens peck lazily near the doorway. In one corner, a dog snores so loudly you wonder if it dreams of chasing seals. The benches lining the walls are covered with woven mats and animal skins, their edges curling from the damp. A few shields hang from the posts, glinting faintly in the firelight, reminders that even in rest, a Viking's world was never far from danger. You crouch beside the hearth, feeling the smoke sting your nose. The fire isn't just for warmth, it's the heart of the longhouse, the pulse that keeps every breath alive. Without it, this place would freeze solid before dawn. There's a rhythm to the life inside. The crackle of logs, the murmur of voices, the soft rustle of wool as someone shifts on the bench. You notice a woman leaning over a cauldron, stirring a stew that smells of fish, onions, and something earthy. The Vikings didn't waste much. Even seaweed sometimes found its way into the pot when supplies ran thin. The walls hum faintly as the wind outside claws at them. You run your fingers along the timbers, thick oak beams, mortised and pegged, locked so tightly that time itself seems to have bent around them. Scholars still argue over whether these longhouses were inspired by shipbuilding techniques or whether the ships came from the halls themselves, born of the same geometry, the same yearning for endurance. Either way, the craftsmanship is undeniable. Every joint, every curve of the beam speaks of people who understood that survival wasn't just strength, it was design. A child giggles somewhere behind you. You turn and see him chasing the smoke with his hand, tracing the patterns it makes in the dim light. His mother scolds softly, waving a ladle in warning, but she's smiling. You can't help smiling too. It's strange, how life insists on joy, even when the walls shake with the wind. You wonder how many nights these people laughed while storms tore through the fjords outside. How many lullabies rose beneath the drone of the wind. Someone offers you a seat near the wall. The bench creaks beneath you as you settle in, and for the first time, your bones stop shivering. The firelight dances on faces, lined, freckled, tired, and you realize this is what warmth really means. Not the absence of cold, but the presence of others. The air still burns your throat, but it also hums with belonging. You glance up at the rafters again. Smoke curls like soft ribbons against the dark wood. Some say the Vikings believed smoke carried their prayers upward, a lazy highway between men and gods. Maybe that's why they never minded breathing it in. It was part of the bargain. The fire feeds the people, and the people feed the gods with their breath. You exhale slowly, watching your own smoke join the dance above. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, the longhouse breathes back steady, smoky, alive. And for the first time, you start to understand how anyone could sleep here, lulled not by silence, but by the rhythm of survival itself. You find your corner of the longhouse, a narrow space between two wooden posts where the light fades into shadow. The air still swirls with smoke, but your body's grown used to it. Like the way sailors learn to sway with the sea instead of fighting it. Someone points to a pile of straw covered with coarse wool, a makeshift bed that looks as though it's seen more winters than you've had birthdays. You lower yourself carefully, hearing the soft crunch of stalks beneath you, and for the first time tonight, you understand what Viking comfort really means. The straw pricks through the thin wool, scratching your palms and neck. It's rough, uneven, but it holds your weight. You shift, trying to find a soft patch, but every movement stirs up tiny clouds of dust that shimmer in the firelight. The smell is earthy, like dried grass soaked in years of sweat. It's not unpleasant, just honest. This is the smell of people who worked, fought, and slept close to the ground. You run your fingers over the wool cover. Thickly woven, slightly greasy from lanolin. That natural wax from sheep that helps keep moisture out. The Vikings spun their wool tight to trap air and warmth. A trick that made even the simplest blanket into a small fortress against the cold. A woman nearby shakes out a fur pelt before lying down beside her husband. The fur looks heavy, mottled with age, probably from a reindeer or maybe a bear. You wonder what story clings to that hide. Was it hunted by the man who sleeps under it now, or traded at some distant fjord for a handful of amber beads? There's something humbling about realizing every scrap here has its own past, its own reason for surviving. Someone laughs softly at the far end of the hall, and a man mutters something about straw mites, tiny pests that supposedly live in the bedding. He scratches his arm and curses in a language you don't quite catch. You can't tell if he's joking or serious, but the idea makes you grin. It's a strange comfort, thinking that even in the age of axes and gods, people still had to battle the itch of bad bedding. The fire pops again, scattering sparks into the gloom. Shadows ripple across the beams like waves. You can almost feel the warmth crawling along the floor toward you, slow but steady. The longhouse holds the heat unevenly. Those near the fire sweat, while those by the walls freeze. You, somewhere in between, are caught in that fragile balance. You pull the wool tighter, your fingers stiff, and listen to the sound of others settling in. The creak of wood, the sigh of tired breath, the occasional cough echoing through the dark. Historians still debate whether Viking families slept together communally like this, or divided their spaces with curtains or planks. Some excavations suggest sleeping platforms raised off the floor, built along the walls to keep away from damp and vermin. Others insist such details depended on wealth and geography, that a chieftain's bed might have been curtained with embroidered fabric, while a fisherman's was nothing more than hay and hide. Whatever the truth, tonight you lie among equals, warriors, wives, children, all bound by the same cold, the same fire, the same fragile dream of warmth. A draught sneaks through a crack in the wall, curling over your feet like a mischievous ghost. You shift again, pulling the wool under your chin. The straw rustles. Outside, the wind moans against the roof. But inside, the rhythm of breathing begins to sink, a soft, collective lullaby of exhaustion. You close your eyes, feeling the ache in your shoulders dissolve into the rough cradle beneath you. The warmth isn't constant, but it's enough. You think of the sea just beyond the walls, its waves frozen mid-roar under the moonlight, and you wonder if the sound of it ever lulled these people to sleep, or if it reminded them of everything waiting out there, the raids, the hunger, the gods who demanded courage as payment for survival. Still, you exhale and let the straw cradle your bones. It isn't luxury, but it's life, and tonight, that's more than enough. The night deepens, and the longhouse hums like a single living thing. You lie still, half buried in straw, and realize how close everyone sleeps. So close that when one person sighs, the whole room seems to breathe with them. There's no privacy here, no quiet cocoon where thoughts can hide. Every cough, every creak of the floor, every snore rolls through the darkness like ripples on water. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the person beside you, a man whose beard brushes your shoulder as he turns. His breath smells faintly of smoked fish and ale. He mumbles something in his sleep, a word that might be a prayer or a curse, and then goes still again. You're surrounded by bodies, men, women, children, even the dogs, all huddled together beneath blankets and pelts, bound by warmth and necessity. The air is thick with the scent of life, sweat, wool, smoke, and the earthy undertone of damp straw. It isn't unpleasant, it's simply human. You feel the rise and fall of the group's breathing, the way warmth gathers in pockets between bodies. It's a strange kind of intimacy, impersonal, practical, and yet oddly comforting. The Vikings knew something we've mostly forgotten, that survival sometimes means giving up space, even dignity, just to share heat. A faint crackling from the hearth sends a flicker of orange across the faces nearby. You catch glimpses of people half buried in their blankets, hair tangled, eyes closed, mouths slightly open. The firelight softens them, turning warriors into dreamers, and you can't help but smile. Somewhere in the shadows, a baby whimpers. A woman stirs, hums a low tune, and the sound threads through the room like warm honey, settling the child and everyone else along with it. You try to drift off, but your neighbor shifts again, elbow brushing your ribs. You suppress a laugh. Sleeping beside strangers or near strangers wasn't exactly optional in these halls. Space was too precious, the cold too cruel. Even chieftains shared their longhouses with servants, slaves, and livestock. A goat bleats softly near the door, perhaps dreaming its own simple dreams of green pastures long buried under snow. You realize the animal's body heat helps keep the room warm. The line between human and beast blurs in the name of survival. Somewhere above, a beam groans as the wind batters the roof. The entire house seems to shudder, but the people don't stir. They're used to it. You wonder how they manage to sleep through such noise, night after night. Maybe exhaustion did what comfort could not. The days were long and brutal. spent hauling nets, chopping wood, mending sails, and carving through ice. By nightfall, even the cold couldn't argue with the weight of fatigue. Historians still debate whether these longhouse communities maintained strict sleeping arrangements, if families clustered together, or if hierarchy determined who slept where. Some records hint that guests of honor might have been given a spot closer to the hearth, while slaves lay by the walls where the drafts crept in. But the archaeological evidence tells a blurrier story. What's certain is that warmth ruled over rank when the temperature fell below mercy. Someone snores loudly, cutting through your thoughts. Then another joins in, forming a rough duet of thunderous breathing that somehow turns the room's chaos into rhythm. You can't help but grin into the darkness. The sound is oddly soothing, a reminder that life persists, messy and loud, even under the thumb of winter. You pull the blanket tighter and breathe through your sleeve, trying to ignore the smell of old fur and human closeness. This is what sleep looked like here. Not comfort, but coexistence. Every shared breath, every rustle of fabric, every accidental elbow was proof that you weren't alone against the cold. You imagine lying like this centuries ago, shoulder to shoulder with people who might never know your name, but would share their warmth without question. The fire pops again, and for a moment sparks drift upward like lazy stars. You let your eyes close, lulled by the chorus of soft snores and the heartbeat of the longhouse itself. The wind can scream all at once outside. In here, you're part of something older and stronger than solitude. The night drags on, and the cold grows bold again, creeping through cracks in the timber walls like a thief. You pull the fur up to your chin, and for a moment you understand why the Vikings layered themselves like the earth. Wool beneath linen, hide over wool, fur over everything. You run your fingers over the edge of your blanket and realize it isn't just one pelt, but a patchwork of many. Fox stitched to sheep, maybe even a scrap of bear along the hem. Nothing here was wasted, not even what the sea brought ashore. Somewhere out there, under the waves, another storm is brewing, and you can almost feel it pressing on the roof, testing your patience and your warmth. The man beside you mutters, shifting restlessly. His feet poke out from the blanket, pale and stiff. You notice his toes look nearly blue, and he tucks them into his partner's furs without apology. She grunts, half asleep, and turns over. You try not to laugh, though the sound nearly slips out. There's something timeless about cold feet in bed. It's the kind of complaint that never evolves. Even Vikings, with their iron will and leather soles, weren't immune to it. The furs themselves have stories. Reindeer hides were the prize of northern traders, so dense they trapped heat, even when wet. Some wealthier families had imported pelts, seal, or even polar bear. Luxuries brought back from voyages that reached the edge of the known world. But most people made do with what the hunt provided. You imagine a family curing the hides outside, scraping the fat, drying them over smoky fires. The smell must have lingered long after, clinging to clothes and hair. But in a land where frost could kill faster than hunger, smell was the least of anyone's worries. The air thickens with the scent of oil and smoke. Someone near the hearth flips a log, and light ripples across the furs like water. For a moment, you think of the animals these blankets once were, roaming forests, diving through icy waves, and it's as if a little of their spirit remains, still lending warmth to the living. You press your hand to the pelt over your chest. The texture is coarse but alive somehow, holding a whisper of the wild world outside. Historians still debate whether Vikings used layered bedding like this, fur atop straw, atop woven cloth, or if that's an invention of later Norse settlers adapting to colder climates. Some excavations reveal bedding remains mixed with animal hair and reed fibers, while others find traces of woven textiles pressed into soil, hinting at something more refined. But here, under this flickering light, it hardly matters which theory wins. You can feel the system working, each layer a compromise between warmth and breath, between luxury and endurance. The wind wails louder now, tugging at the smoke hole above. Someone mumbles a half prayer to Thor, or maybe to the hearth spirit who guards sleepers from frostbite. You smile into the dark. People once believed the gods themselves could freeze if not remembered on cold nights. There's a charm carved into the beam near your head. A small spiral of wood with ash rubbed into it, probably meant to keep winter spirits away. The thought gives you a quiet comfort. Even the toughest warriors liked a little superstition tucked under their pillow. You curl tighter, pulling your knees up, cocooned in fur. The straw beneath rustles softly. The fire burns low, its glow fading to a heartbeat's pulse. For a moment, it feels like you're not lying on the ground but adrift, floating somewhere between dream and survival. The sound of the storm outside becomes distant, like the ocean's breath against your ear. You think about those who once slept here centuries ago, hands calloused from oars, faces burned by salt wind, and realize they felt the same chill, the same fragile gratitude for warmth. History tends to carve them as fearless, unyielding, but here, in this quiet, they're simply human, cold, tired and grateful for anything that keeps them alive until dawn. You close your eyes, the fur pressing against your cheek, and let the wind's song fade into the rhythm of sleep. The fire murmurs through the night like an old storyteller too tired to speak in full sentences. You watch it from your corner, its pulse steady but uneven. The last orange embers cradled by grey ash. Every few moments, the logs sigh, and sparks dart upward, chasing the smoke toward the roof's dark hollow. You can almost believe the fire has its own rhythm, a heartbeat the longhouse depends on. Without it, everything would stiffen, freeze, and crumble into silence. You shift slightly, stretching your legs toward the warmth. The heat comes in waves, rolling against your skin, fading, then returning like breath. It's mesmerizing. Around you, people sleep, their faces half lit in the glow, features soft and unguarded. You see how the fire paints them in amber and shadow, how the flicker gives life to everything it touches. Wool, wood, and weary souls. The hearth isn't just warmth, it's the center of the universe in here. The Vikings built their homes around it, literally and spiritually. The word they used for home, you remember, once meant the place with a fire. That's how deeply the flame was tied to identity, to existence itself. A few coals collapse inward, sending a small plume of smoke into the air. You cough quietly, but no one stirs. The smell is thick and resinous. Pine, birch, and maybe a bit of driftwood. You think about how much effort went into keeping that fire alive. Every log had to be cut, split, dried, and guarded. Wood was precious along the coasts. Much of the land was treeless or stunted by salt winds. Some families gathered kelp and dried seaweed to burn when timber ran low. The idea of seaweed fires sounds absurd to you, but it worked well enough to toast bread and warm bones. The man tending the fire shifts in his sleep and grumbles. He'll wake soon to feed it, as someone always must. The longhouse runs on duty as much as flame. Each person takes a turn to keep the hearth breathing through the night. The firekeeper's job is sacred, and stories say that letting it die could invite bad luck, or even spirits of frost into the home. You can almost feel the weight of that superstition pressing against the door, waiting for a moment of carelessness to slip in. There's an old story, whispered among traders, how a woman once fell, asleep while tending her hearth, and woke to find the fire cold, and her house coated in ice inside and out. They said her dreams had frozen solid. She broke them with her hands, piece by piece, and the sound was like glass shattering. You don't know if anyone ever believed it, but it fits the mood of nights like this, when reality feels thin and myth close enough to touch. Historians still debate how Viking hearths managed their smoke, whether the central fire pit had a stone-lined trench beneath it for airflow, or if the longhouse simply relied on open gaps in the roof to vent it. Some excavations suggest clever design, others insist it was all improvisation, guided more by luck than engineering. You look up through the haze and imagine centuries of smoke staining the beams, layering the air with history itself. The flames crackle again, louder this time, pulling you back to the present. A woman near the fire shifts her blanket and throws another log into the pit. The fire answers like a creature startled awake, hissing and flaring gold. For a moment, the entire hall brightens. You catch glints of metal, sword hilts, belt buckles, cooking pots, flashing like distant stars. And in that shimmer, there's a feeling of safety, a fragile illusion that the night can be kept at bay if the fire just burns long enough. You rest your head on your folded arm and watch the shadows move like tides. The sound of the fire fills your ears, a steady crackle, soft and ancient. It's the same sound every Viking ever heard, the same warmth they clung to. In a world of storms and sea monsters and endless night, this simple glow was their anchor. You close your eyes, letting the fire's rhythm slow your thoughts until all that's left is the heartbeat of flame. The storm arrives without warning. One moment the longhouse hums softly with sleep, and the next, the wind slams into the walls like a giant's fist. The wooden beams groan, dust shakes loose from the rafters, and drifts into the air like snow. You jolt awake, heart pounding, unsure whether it's thunder or the sea roaring outside. For a moment, it feels as if the whole world has turned to water and noise. You pull the fur tighter around your shoulders and listen. The wind doesn't howl so much as scream, high and unbroken, a note that feels almost alive. Outside, the fjord is a dark, furious thing, waves pounding against rock, spray freezing before it lands. You can hear it all through the turf walls. The hiss of sleet, the boom of water against the shore, the groan of ships straining against their moorings. Somewhere beyond the darkness, a wooden hull creaks, a ghostly sound that makes your skin prickle. The sea is trying to get in. A man by the hearth stirs and swears under his breath. He pushes a log deeper into the fire, coaxing more flame. The smoke thickens, swirling under the roof as if afraid to leave. The air smells of salt and sap and something metallic, like the breath of the storm itself. You sit up and watch as the others slowly wake. No one panics. Storms like this are old acquaintances here. A few people mutter to the gods, quick prayers spoken between clenched teeth. You can almost taste the fear. They won't admit it, but it lingers, thin and sharp, like smoke before lightning. One of the men rises and checks the beams near the door. His hand runs along the wood, feeling for weakness. The Vikings built their homes to endure this. Walls thick with turf and sod. Roofs sloped low to let wind slide over, instead of tearing through. The strength lies not in defiance, but in yielding, much like the people who live here. Still, you wonder how many nights like this ended with a roof peeled back or a wall caved in. Historians still argue over how stormproof these homes truly were. Some claim the designs were ingenious, tested by centuries of northern tempests. Others suggest many longhouses didn't survive more than a few decades before the elements devoured them. You feel the walls tremble, and suddenly both theories seem believable. Someone laughs softly, though the sound carries no humor. "The gods are rowing again," he says, his voice raspy. You can't help but smile at the image. Thor and Njord, sea and storm, wrestling above your roof while mortals huddle like mice below. There's a strange comfort in imagining chaos as divine rather than random. You close your eyes and picture it. Long-bearded gods hauling waves with ropes of lightning, shouting into the wind as they chase each other across the sky. The fire flares again, throwing light across the room. It dances on the beams and faces, catching in eyes that shine with fatigue and stubbornness. You realize that's what these people are built from. Not muscle or myth, but sheer, practical endurance. When storms came, they didn't run or curse the heavens. They patched, prayed, and waited. Survival wasn't heroic. It was routine. The wind howls harder, forcing its way through the smoke hole. A few sparks leap upward and vanish in the draft. You can feel the cold sliding down from above, sharp as a knife, biting into your exposed fingers. Someone drapes an extra hide across the gap, and the chill dulls to a whisper. For a moment, the longhouse breathes again, its heartbeat returning, slow and steady. Outside, the sea still rages, but inside, the rhythm of survival takes over. A woman hums softly, maybe to calm her children or herself. The melody rises and falls, fragile as thread. You realize this is how people made it through nights like these. Not through strength, but through sound, through shared silence broken only by human presence. The storm can roar all at once. In here, the warmth of the fire and the closeness of others drown it out. You settle back down, eyes fixed on the roof beams, each one quivering under the weight of the wind. You wonder how many centuries those same storms have blown across these same fjords, testing every wall, every life. And still, people keep building fires, keep singing through the noise, keep surviving. You pull the fur close again, breathing in the smoky air. The storm will pass, they always do. Sleep comes and goes in pieces, torn apart by the wind. You drift somewhere between dreaming and waking, where the roar of the sea becomes a rhythm, like breathing from another world. The fire flickers low, painting the walls in restless amber strokes. Your eyes flutter open, and for a moment, you aren't sure where you are. Then you remember, the longhouse, the furs, the storm that refuses to die. The air hums with it, even now, long past midnight. You lie still, letting your mind wander, and it begins to stitch together strange images. Ships sliding through frozen mist, warriors rowing beneath a red sky. The salt spray hits your face even though you're miles from shore. You're dreaming, half awake, half adrift. The Vikings believed dreams were more than just shadows of thought. They were messages, omens, and sometimes doorways to other worlds. A dream could be a warning, a prophecy, or a conversation with gods. You wonder what message this one carries as your thoughts blur with the sound of waves. A faint voice hums from somewhere near the hearth, low and rhythmic. At first, you think it's someone singing in their sleep, but the melody grows steadier, clearer. It's an old sea song, slow as the tide. You can't make out the words, but you recognize the tone. Melancholy, proud. The sound of sailors remembering the home they left behind. You imagine it's a song about drakars, those long, slender ships that carried Vikings across oceans. Sleek, beautiful monsters with carved dragon heads meant to scare spirits away. The rhythm of the song mimics the pull of oars. Row, breathe, row. Even half asleep, your body sways to it. The song fades, replaced by silence, and in that stillness, your mind begins to wander again. You think of the stories they told about dreams, how Odin himself could walk through them, whispering secrets to those he favored. Maybe that's why the old ones slept with their heads toward the fire and their feet toward the door, to face warmth and life instead of the cold unknown outside. Or maybe it was just practical, so they could leap up quickly if raiders came. Historians can't seem to agree. Some say the layout of Viking sleeping spaces reflected social hierarchy and superstition. Others argue it was simply about convenience and space. You smile at the thought of scholars in warm offices debating which way ancient sleepers pointed their toes while the storm of the past howled on without them. The air thickens again with smoke. You roll onto your back and watch it drift upward, curling toward the smoke hole where snowflakes sometimes slip through, glowing briefly before they melt into nothing. There's beauty in that. Snow falling inside, like the sky trying to visit for a moment. One tiny flake lands on your forehead, cold as truth, then vanishes. You laugh softly to yourself, and someone nearby mutters, thinking you're talking in your sleep. The wind outside begins to ease, the storm breaking apart into sighs. In the lull, you hear the sea clearer now, the long exhale of waves retreating from the rocks. You think about how these people trusted the sea even as it devoured them. It gave them food, trade, conquest, and song. And when they dreamed, the sea followed them even here, into their sleep, whispering of distant lands and monsters beneath the waves. You pull the fur tighter, and your mind drifts toward myth again. Maybe this is what it felt like to dream in the Viking Age. Half rooted in the world, half sailing through the realm of gods and ghosts. Maybe their dreams weren't escapes at all, but rehearsals for the lives they led. Bold, unpredictable, filled with both beauty and danger. The storm finally weakens to a tired hum. The fire softens to embers. You breathe deep, tasting the mix of smoke and salt. And for a moment, between sleep and waking, you swear you hear the ocean whisper your name. When morning still refuses to come, someone near the hearth stirs a clay jug, and the sharp, honeyed scent of mead cuts through the smoky air. The night isn't over, but the cold has bitten deep enough that sleep has surrendered. You sit up, hair stiff with frost at the edges, and reach for the cup that's offered your way. It's rough pottery, warm against your palms, and the drink inside glows amber like captured sunlight. One sip burns sweetly down your throat, and for the first time in hours, you feel human again. Mead isn't just a drink here. It's medicine, fuel, and comfort. Made from honey, water, and wild yeast, it's the taste of stored summer. The Vikings prized it above all else, a liquid warmth that softened the edges of hunger and grief. You can imagine how sacred that must have felt. Warmth in a cup when the world outside could kill you for blinking too slow. The people around you share it sparingly, taking turns. Each swallow is followed by a sigh that feels like gratitude disguised as sound. The fire burns low, glowing in its stone cradle. Someone pokes at it lazily with a stick, then sits back, wrapping their cloak tighter. You notice the flicker of light on their faces. Eyes half closed, cheeks flushed with the gentle heat of alcohol. Laughter stirs from one corner, quiet but real. It spreads easily, as though it's been waiting for permission. One man raises his mug and slurs a toast to the gods. Another adds a prayer for warmer feet. The whole group chuckles, and the sound hums against the timber walls, soft and sleepy. You take another sip. The taste lingers, sweet and smoky, with a hint of something wild, maybe pine or herbs. Someone must have flavored it with juniper berries or a pinch of seaweed, a quirk of local brewing. The idea makes you smile. You never thought seaweed could belong in a drink. But in a land where everything useful is precious, flavor itself becomes an act of defiance. There's a kind of beauty in that. A refusal to let the cold strip away every joy. A man across the fire begins to tell a story, his voice slow and thick. It's about Thor crossing the sea during winter, stealing the sun from the frost giants to bring it back to humankind. The others murmur in approval, some nodding, others closing their eyes to let the words sink in. You realize that stories here serve the same purpose as the fire and the mead. To keep the dark at bay, to remind people that warmth isn't only physical. Historians still argue about how widespread the drinking of mead truly was among everyday Vikings. Some claim it was reserved for special feasts and ceremonies, while others believe even the poorest households brewed their own in small batches. You sip again, feeling the slow burn spread through your chest, and you can't help but think that both sides might be right. After all, necessity and celebration often looked the same in a place where surviving winter was itself a kind of festival. Someone passes you a hunk of bread, rough and dark from the hearth's edge. You tear off a piece and dip it into your drink, letting it soak before biting. The sweetness mixes with the bitterness of the crust, a strange, satisfying blend. You chew slowly, aware of the way the simple act feels luxurious. Maybe that's what the mead does best. It reminds you that even hardship can taste good for a moment. The fire hums louder now. Someone adds another log, and the room brightens just enough to reveal faces softened by warmth and exhaustion. The laughter fades to murmurs again, to drowsy smiles. The storm still growls faintly beyond the walls, but no one seems to notice anymore. You lean back, cup still warm in your hands, and feel the edges of your consciousness start to blur. The mead has done its work, pulling your heartbeat into sync with the fire's rhythm. You close your eyes. The longhouse breathes. The sea moans in the distance, and the night wraps you up like a half-told story. Morning comes quietly, not with sunlight, but with sound. The first thing you hear is a soft cluck, then another, followed by the low bleat of a goat complaining about the cold. You open your eyes to see the longhouse alive again, not with warriors and firelight, but with the messy, breathing pulse of daily life. The air smells of smoke and hay and something sour that might be milk left too close to the hearth. A child laughs, chasing a chicken that somehow slipped its rope, feathers scattering like snowflakes across the dirt floor. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, and realize there's barely space to move. The benches are cluttered with baskets, skins, and the tools of survival. Wooden buckets, clay jars, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. A woman crouches near the doorway, milking a goat that seems entirely unimpressed by the attention. Its warm breath steams in the cold air, and the rhythmic squish of milk hitting a wooden pail becomes part of the morning's music. You've woken not in a household, but in a small ecosystem, one where humans and animals share the same fragile warmth. The idea seems strange to modern ears, but for Vikings, it was normal. Cows, sheep, goats, and chickens often lived inside the longhouse during winter, their body heat helping to warm the room while providing milk, eggs, and wool. The smell, you imagine, was intense. Half comfort, half chaos. Still, it was better than freezing. You watch as a boy tosses a handful of grain toward the chickens, and they scurry forward, clucking like gossiping grandmothers. One bold hen jumps onto a bench and pecks at a sleeping man's beard until he curses and swats her away. The boy laughs so hard he nearly falls over. You can't help but smile. Life here is noisy, unpredictable, and deeply human. There's no space for luxury, but there's room for laughter, even in the thick of hardship. You notice a small dog curled up near the hearth, its fur singed at the edges, likely from getting too close to the flames. The creature stretches, yawns, and goes right back to sleep, utterly content. It's easy to forget that warmth wasn't just shared among people. It was communal in the truest sense. Every creature earned its place by existing together. A woman sets a clay pot of milk near the fire to warm, stirring it with a carved wooden spoon. The milk froths and releases a smell faintly sweet, faintly smoky. You've read that sometimes people added bits of pine resin, or even crushed bones to fortify their food, especially during lean months when supplies ran low. It sounds grim, but it kept bellies full, and maybe in some strange way it worked as comfort food. There's a strange beauty in how necessity shapes flavor, how survival becomes its own recipe. As the morning noise grows, someone starts sweeping the floor with a broom made of birch twigs. Dust dances in the light spilling from the smoke hole. The storm outside has finally quieted, leaving a silver glow filtering through the gaps in the roof. You can hear the drip of melting frost, the world outside slowly softening. The longhouse feels smaller in daylight, its secrets exposed. The walls are scarred from years of smoke and storms, the timbers dark and uneven. Yet there's pride in how it all still stands, how even after nights like that, life always continues. Scholars still debate how households like this were arranged, whether families and livestock truly shared one central hall, or if animals were separated by low partitions. Some excavations suggest clear divisions. Others reveal trampled layers of soil packed with both human debris and animal remains. You look around this cramped living space and decide the truth must lie somewhere between. Boundaries blurred, comfort traded for survival. A rooster crows suddenly, far too close to your ear, and you laugh despite yourself. The sound is sharp, ridiculous, full of stubborn joy. The fire pops, sending a small spark onto the floor, which a quick hand snuffs out. Someone hums a morning tune, slow and lilting, while a baby coos nearby. The longhouse smells of life again, of work to do, meals to make, and another day to endure. You stretch, roll your shoulders, and for a fleeting moment, you almost envy them. Their resilience, their simplicity, the way they wake to noise and chaos and call it home. By midday, the wind outside has dulled to a steady whisper, but inside the longhouse, the air hums with the sounds of work. You sit near the hearth, watching a man with thick hands and clever eyes inspect the wall beams. His name isn't given, but you can tell he's the carpenter, the quiet guardian of the structure itself. He taps along the timber, listening to its song, nodding when the tone is right, frowning when it's not. Each sound tells him something about the health of the hall, as though the house speaks in wooden heartbeats. He squats beside a post and slides a wedge beneath it, testing the fit. The motion is rhythmic, practiced. These walls aren't simple logs piled in haste. They're crafted with the precision of someone who understands that warmth depends on design. The planks interlock through wooden joints, fitted so tightly that you can't slip a blade between them. You trace the line where the wood meets the packed turf, marveling at the subtle genius of it. The sod holds heat, the timber holds strength, and together they breathe through the winter like a living skin. The carpenter mutters something about smoke not drawing right. You look up and notice how it curls near the rafters, hanging lower than it should. The longhouse doesn't have a chimney, just a smoke hole at the top, a wound that exhales heat and memory together. Too wide, and the warmth escapes. Too narrow, and the smoke suffocates. It's a constant balancing act, one that defines every night's sleep. He adjusts a panel above the fire, shifting its angle with a small stick. The smoke suddenly rises straighter, as if persuaded by wisdom rather than force. You wonder how many winters of trial and error it took to perfect something so simple. He gestures for you to look closer at the wall. You run your palm along the surface. Rough, cool, yet faintly damp. The turf is layered over woven branches, a lattice that traps air like insulation. Some even say the Vikings lined their walls with seaweed to plug leaks, though the smell must have been unbearable. You laugh softly at the thought, imagining a family sitting proudly under a roof that smelled like the ocean on a bad day. Still, necessity breeds invention, and here, every idea, no matter how strange, was worth testing if it meant surviving another winter. Historians still argue about the earliest use of these turf and timber hybrids. Some claim they originated in Norway, where forests met frozen ground, while others believe Icelandic settlers perfected the technique after learning how wind could carve through wood alone. The truth, you suspect, is that both are right. Innovation rarely belongs to one place or one time. The carpenter before you isn't following blueprints. He's following instinct passed down through generations, a chain of memory older than any sagas. He steps back, satisfied with his repairs, and wipes his hands on his tunic. A few children gather near his tools, curious about the small wooden pegs and bone-handled knives. One of them asks how the roof stays up without falling. The carpenter grins, taps his chest, and says something that sounds like, "Because it wants to live." The children giggle, and you can't help smiling too. It's a whimsical thought, but in this place, it doesn't feel wrong. The house does seem alive, creaking, breathing, enduring. You glance up again at the roof beams, darkened with years of smoke. They arch like ribs, the longhouse itself a great wooden body protecting those inside. Maybe that's why the Vikings carved their homes with care. They weren't just shelters, but companions. Every beam and peg carried a touch of reverence. The carpenter's hands, rough and calloused, move like a priest's at prayer when he tidies his tools. Outside, the The sky has begun to pale, a soft grey light filtering through the smoke hole. The storm has passed. You can hear the sea again, distant and slow, licking at the rocks instead of devouring them. The carpenter leans against the wall, satisfied, his work invisible yet essential. You think of how many nameless builders kept generations alive, their craft hidden beneath furs and laughter. As the fire crackles beside you, the longhouse settles into quiet once more, a creature at peace, its heart strong for another night. As dusk returns, the longhouse dims again, its light slipping into amber tones. You notice how the air changes. The smoke thickens, heavier now, scented with oil instead of wood. Someone has lit a small lamp, a squat clay bowl filled with whale oil. The flame trembles, licking at the rim, its glow steady but soft. It's a strange kind of warmth, more scent than heat, more presence than light. The smell clings to your tongue, oily and salty, like breathing through the ocean itself. You can almost picture the whale it came from, a vast creature gliding beneath black waves, now keeping this small world alive. You lean closer, studying the lamp. Its wick is nothing more than twisted moss soaked in oil, the simplest technology carrying the weight of survival. A woman adjusts it carefully, shielding it with her hand so the flame doesn't sputter. The Vikings used whatever the sea offered, whale oil, seal fat, even fish oil, to light their nights. It wasn't glamorous, but it was dependable. The glow reaches across the hall, bouncing off the metal studs on the door, catching the faint sheen of sweat on tired faces. For a moment, the room feels smaller, wrapped in gold and shadow. There's a rhythm to this quiet. The drip of melting frost from the rafters, the soft burble of stew thickening over the hearth, the low murmur of voices. You can see the lamps scattered through the hall like tiny stars, each one breathing faint smoke into the air. The smell is unmistakable, sharp, briny, a ghost of the ocean trapped indoors. Some say the lamps smoked less if bits of seaweed were mixed with the oil, though that seems more wish than fact. Still, it's easy to imagine someone discovering that trick by accident and swearing it worked. Necessity makes believers of everyone. The flickering light paints long shadows on the turf walls. You trace one with your eyes, watching it bend and stretch as the flame dances. The air feels thick with history, with the repetition of nights just like this one. 1,000 winters might have passed in exactly this way. People gathered in circles of light, whispering stories while the rest of the world howled in darkness. You begin to understand why these lamps mattered beyond survival. They weren't just tools. They were symbols of defiance, fragile proof that the sea couldn't claim everything. Somewhere in the corner, a man begins carving into a piece of driftwood, his knife flashing in the lamplight. You hear the scrape slow and deliberate as shavings fall onto the dirt floor. Maybe he's carving a charm, a ship, a fish, or the spiral pattern that turns up so often in Norse art. Each line holds intention, a way to keep luck close. When he's done, he sets it beside the lamp. The flame glows against the fresh carving, and it almost looks alive. Historians still debate how common these whale oil lamps were across different Viking settlements. Some argue they were luxuries, rare outside coastal regions rich in marine life. Others claim they were standard, carried on ships and used even inland when trade routes allowed. Either way, the evidence lingers in fragments, bits of soot-blackened clay found in ancient hearths, whispering that even the poorest families fought back the dark. You look at the flame again and feel that fight in your bones. The woman tending the lamp hums quietly to herself, maybe to keep time, maybe to comfort the silence. Her face glows gold, lined but calm, and her eyes reflect the flame as though it burns inside her. The light touches everyone, men, children, even the dog curled at her feet. And for a few fragile moments, the longhouse feels like the center of the universe. Outside, the sea groans beneath its frozen skin. The wind prowls the cliffs. But inside this trembling circle of light, humanity endures. You inhale the scent of oil and smoke, both heavy and oddly soothing. Your eyes sting a little, but you don't mind. This light was earned. It's the kind that makes you grateful simply to see, to breathe, to exist. You close your eyes and let the warmth from that tiny flame rest against your skin like a heartbeat that refuses to fade. The night lingers long, and with it comes a smell that seeps into everything. Wool, hair, breath, even dreams. You can't escape it, nor do you try. It's the scent of survival. Sweat layered over smoke, mingled with damp straw and sea salt. You breathe it in deeply, and though it burns your throat, there's something grounding about it. something ancient. This isn't the sweet air of comfort. It's the perfume of effort. The proof that you've lived through another night in a world built to test you. You stretch and sit up, the furs sliding off your shoulders. The straw beneath you crackles softly. Around you, the longhouse stirs in slow waves of motion. Someone coughs, someone else yawns. A woman combs her hair with a bone pick, its teeth smooth from years of use. The comb gleams faintly in the firelight, a simple tool, yet carved with delicate patterns, spirals and knots. The Vikings valued grooming far more than their modern image of savagery suggests. They even carried small grooming kits made of iron or bone, combs, tweezers, ear spoons, all tucked neatly into pouches at their belts. You imagine a raider on a cold morning, carefully untangling his beard before setting out to raid some distant monastery. The thought makes you grin. Even warriors hated a bad hair day. The smoke above your head curls into new shapes, forming a cloud that never disperses. It clings to the roof beams, stains the air, darkens the wood. You wonder how lungs could survive decades of this. The heat may keep you alive, but it also poisons you slowly, one quiet breath at a time. Yet the people endure, their bodies adjusting, their lives wrapped in the balance between warmth and breath. The smell of smoke is their second skin, and when they walk outside, even the wind must recognize it as part of them. You glance toward the doorway, where a few people are shaking out blankets and sweeping the floor. Dust rises, catching the light like floating gold. Beneath it, the air smells of earth and animal fat. The mixture is potent, but strangely comforting. It reminds you of the honesty of living close to necessity. Nothing here is sanitized or polished. Every smell tells a story. The wool that once walked through snow, the sweat earned from chopping wood, the salt that blew in from the sea. You shift closer to the fire, holding your hands to the warmth. The flames have grown lazy, their edges curling like petals. A pot hangs over the embers, filled with fish broth and herbs. You breathe it in, grateful for something fresh. Someone drops in a sliver of dried kelp, claiming it makes the stomach brave. You raise an eyebrow at that. Another piece of Viking wisdom that straddles the line between superstition and science. Maybe they were right. Maybe bravery starts with whatever you can stomach. Historians still argue about hygiene among the Norse. Some claim they were remarkably clean for their time, bathing weekly in heated springs, or washing in rivers whenever possible. Others believe that was rare luxury, possible only for those living near natural hot water. The truth likely lies somewhere in the smoke. A compromise between cleanliness and survival. You can't help but think of how much more they valued being hardy than being spotless. A little dirt wasn't shame. It was experience. A child toddles past you, hair wild, cheeks streaked with ash. He trips and laughs, and his mother scoops him up, kissing the soot from his nose. The gesture feels timeless. The smell of her hair mixes with the fire, earthy and sweet. And for a moment, you forget the cold, the hardship, the centuries. This is what endurance looks like. Not stoic silence, but small tendernesses buried in rough days. The longhouse fills with quiet chatter now. People trading jokes and bits of gossip between chores. Laughter rolls softly through the smoke, a reminder that even among hardship, life still finds its rhythm. You lean back against the beam, your skin sticky from the heat, and close your eyes. The smell clings to you like an old friend, stubborn, familiar, irreplaceable. It isn't pleasant, but it's real. And in this place, reality is the only luxury that matters. The fire sighs lower as the evening creeps back in, shadows pooling around the benches like ink. You watch the last flames stretch and shrink, their edges dulling from gold to red. The warmth that once filled the longhouse is fading, leaving behind a brittle chill that seeps through the floor. You tug the fur around your shoulders tighter, but it feels thinner now, the night greedier. The smell of char and damp wool lingers, a scent that's part comfort, part warning. Everyone here knows what happens when the fire dies before dawn. It becomes the house's slow surrender. A woman kneels by the hearth, poking at the glowing coals with a stick. The wood crumbles, collapsing inward. She curses softly, then blows on the embers, her breath curling like smoke itself. For a brief moment, the coals flare orange, teasing hope. But the flare dies. You can hear the faint hiss of snow outside. The storm has returned, quieter but meaner, the kind that burrows into bones. A man stands, stretching stiffly, and moves to fetch more logs. You can tell they're running low. His footsteps sound heavier than before. the rhythm of someone measuring each piece of wood against the length of the night. The darkness grows denser, and you feel it breathing. It presses against the walls, hums through the roof beams. Somewhere in the corner, a baby whimpers, sensing what adults pretend not to fear. The silence that follows when the fire's heart falters. The woman hums to calm the child, her voice trembling in the half-light. It's a song of warmth, of homes promised beyond the snow. And the sound fills the room like soft cloth pulled over a wound. You look at the coals again, watching how the faint glow pulses, a stubborn heart refusing to quit. People take turns crouching near it, shielding it from the drafts, feeding it tiny slivers of wood. It's a ritual, quiet, precise, almost holy. The Vikings understood that the hearth wasn't just a tool, it was the spirit of the house, the thread between survival and death. Archaeologists have found traces of charred stones in longhouse foundations, carefully arranged even after centuries of collapse. Maybe that was reverence, or maybe habit turned sacred over time. You reach out your hand toward the fading light. The heat barely brushes your skin. Someone drops a strip of birch bark into the coals, and a bright crackle splits the quiet. The flame returns briefly, licking up the bark's curls, flaring in colors that shift from orange to blue before fading again. For a second, everyone exhales in relief. Then the woman sighs and shakes her head. It won't last. The wood's too damp. Historians still puzzle over how these people managed to keep fires alive through the worst months, especially when snow smothered their wood piles and damp made sparks stubborn. Some think they kept small hearths smouldering day and night, their coals buried under ash to preserve heat. Others argue they carried fire from neighbor to neighbor, sharing flame like shared breath. You like that image best, the idea of fire as something communal, passed hand to hand, a living gift rather than a possession. A man opens the door just long enough to toss in a few chunks of frozen wood from outside. The cold crashes in like a beast, sharp enough to sting your lungs. You shiver, pulling your knees to your chest. The logs hiss as they hit the coals, steam rising, and then, miraculously, the fire catches. Flames rise again, trembling at first, then growing bold. The entire hall exhales as warmth returns, soft and shy but present. You lean back, watching the flicker crawl across the faces around you. Relief looks the same in every century. Eyelids drooping, shoulders loosening, small smiles tugging at lips. The fire spits once, sending sparks into the dark. And for a heartbeat, the entire longhouse glows as though alive again. You close your eyes, feeling its breath against your skin. For now, the cold waits outside. For now, the night belongs to flame. By dawn, the fire's glow is little more than memory. The air inside the longhouse feels fragile, thin as a held breath. You exhale, watching your own warmth cloud in front of you, ghosts of heat that vanish too quickly to matter. When you press your palm to the wall beside you, it's slick with frost. The timber is white with a delicate film of ice, like the house itself has started to crystallize. The cold has come inside now, polite but insistent, claiming every inch it can reach. You pull your fur tighter, feeling its damp weight against your shoulders. The night's condensation has soaked through everything: wool, straw, even skin. There's no true dryness here, only degrees of damp. The floor glistens faintly in the weak light that seeps through the smoke hole. You imagine how the frost must look from outside, a house breathing steam, wrapped in ice, defying logic by still being alive. A man stirs near the door, rubbing his hands together and muttering about frozen boots. He holds one up to the fire pit's remains, trying to thaw it. The sole cracks faintly under his fingers. You hear him laugh, though it's a tired sound. He says something about the gods favoring those who keep both feet, and everyone within earshot chuckles softly. Humor is the last defense here, the kind that keeps despair from taking root. The longhouse feels smaller this morning. The smoke has settled low, mingling with mist that crawls in through every crevice. You can smell the ocean again, faint but unmistakable, like cold metal and salt. Outside, gulls cry somewhere above the frozen surf, a sound thin and distant. You imagine the shore, the boats half buried in ice, their curved prows rimed with frost. Some say the Vikings rubbed their ships with animal fat to keep the planks from freezing and splitting. A clever, desperate trick that probably left everything smelling faintly like stew. You smile at the thought because it fits. Nothing about this life was clean, but everything was deliberate. A woman rises and begins scraping frost from the inside of the door with a knife. The sound, sharp and brittle, echoes through the hall. The children groan, burying their faces in the furs, unwilling to move yet. You can't blame them. The air bites hard this morning, even here inside. The frost shimmers along the roof beams, delicate patterns blooming like white flowers in the dark. You reach up and touch one, only to feel it melt instantly against your skin. Historians still argue whether these icy mornings were common inside Viking homes, or whether they're an exaggeration drawn from modern reconstructions. Some claim well-built longhouses held heat better than we assume, insulated so deeply that frost couldn't cling to the inner walls. Others insist the combination of smoke, damp breath, and poor ventilation made interior frost inevitable. You look around the dim hall, the slow dripping from thawing beams, and the debate feels distant. The truth is in the air, tangible, glittering, unignorable. A woman begins to stir the embers, coaxing the fire back to life. Her movements are calm, patient, almost ritualistic. The first lick of flame trembles to life, shy but certain. Around you, people wake one by one, shaking the stiffness from their limbs. A man sneezes, the sound loud and startling in the stillness. Then another coughs, deep and rough, and a few others laugh tiredly. The noise feels like morning's heartbeat, slow but steady. You stretch your legs, the straw beneath you crackling. The air is still cold enough to sting, but the return of flame changes everything. A small circle of light grows, orange pushing back the grey. It touches the frost, makes it glitter, then melt. The droplets slipping down the wall like tears. You watch them fall, slow and sure, leaving trails behind. Outside, the storm has passed. The world will remain frozen for weeks, but here, inside this smoky hall, you've survived another night. You look around and realize that survival here isn't triumph. It's simply rhythm. Freeze, thaw, breathe, repeat. The frost will return tomorrow, and they'll fight it again. With fire, laughter, and the stubborn pulse of human warmth. The night returns, and with it comes the kind of cold that doesn't merely sting. It seeps. It slides into the seams of wood, creeps through the grain of bone, hums behind your teeth. The longhouse groans softly under its weight. Every beam stiff with frost. Every sound swallowed by a hush that feels older than time itself. You lie beneath your furs, half awake, watching the fire shrink into a red thread across the hearth. The air is heavy, and the silence, thicker than smoke, feels watchful. Sleep teases you, but it doesn't come easily here. Maybe it's the wind's strange rhythm, or the whisper of something just beyond the edge of sound. You close your eyes and let your breathing slow, waiting for that liminal space between waking and dreaming, where the mind begins to wander on its own. It doesn't take long before you start to see things, shapes shifting in the glow of the coals, faces flickering across the orange light. Some belong to memory, others to imagination. The Vikings believed dreams could be more than idle fictions of the mind. They were journeys, warnings, visitations. To them, the boundary between this world and the next was porous, especially in winter, when the dark stretched longer than reason. A murmur ripples through the hall. You lift your head and see the old woman near the door, the one they call Brynja. Her hair spills like snow over her shoulders, and her eyes are sharp even in the dimness. She mutters under her breath, fingers tracing invisible symbols in the air. The others watch her, half wary, half trusting. She's the dream keeper, they say, the one who can read the meanings hidden in a sleeper's breath. Every village has one, though no two are ever alike. Brynja claims she can hear the frost spirits talking through the rafters, that when the wind shifts direction, it carries the dead on its back. You've seen how seriously people listen to her. She stands now, wrapping a thin wool shawl around her shoulders, and moves toward the fire. The flames catch her profile, creases like riverbeds, eyes still full of stormlight. She takes a small pouch from her belt, shakes it gently, and the faint scent of herbs fills the air, something bitter and sweet all at once. Mugwort maybe, or crushed juniper. She sprinkles it onto the coals, and smoke rises, thick and white, curling toward the roof beams. The smell sharpens, and the air hums like it's listening. Someone near you crosses themselves, though not the Christian way. The motion is older, a small gesture across the heart meant to confuse wandering spirits. Brynja notices and smiles, the kind of smile that carries both affection and scorn. No spirit needs to be fooled, she whispers, only respected. Then she sits, and her voice drops lower still, threading through the crackle of fire. She speaks of Draga, the restless dead who refused to stay buried. The stories say they rise in the deep of winter, drawn by the warmth of the living. Some appear as shadows, others as full-bodied horrors, with blue skin and seaweed in their hair. They're jealous of breath, hungry for heat. To keep them away, the Vikings placed iron at the head of the bed, or painted runes above the door. The dead, Brynja says, fear iron more than fire. You glance toward the entrance, where someone has indeed hammered an old horseshoe into the lintel, blackened by smoke. It glints faintly in the firelight. Historians have found similar charms buried in Viking homes, though they still argue about whether these were magical talismans or simply practical tools repurposed with meaning. Some scholars call it superstition, others call it early spirituality. To the people huddled in this hall, it's simply habit. Belief is warmth, another kind of insulation when the cold becomes unbearable. Brynja's voice softens now, almost kind. She tells of a spirit who blesses sleepers with good dreams, the marauder, a creature that drifts through the hall on nights when the wind is calm. It presses gently on the chest of those it visits, not to harm, but to remind them to breathe. You think of the modern word nightmare, and wonder if this is where it was born, somewhere in the uneasy half-sleep of these winters. The fire spits suddenly, as if in agreement, and everyone startles. Then laughter follows, uneasy but real. Someone jokes that the spirit prefers well-fed dreamers, and the tension breaks. Even Brynja smiles, her eyes glinting like embers. Then we must keep the pot full, she says. No spirit wants to haunt an empty belly. You laugh too, though something in the air still prickles at the edge of your senses. You lie back down, furs pulled high, and stare into the rafters. The wind outside has changed direction again, slipping through the roof with a soft sigh. Brynja murmurs one last word in a language too old to know, and then silence folds over everything once more. You close your eyes and let yourself drift, but the dreams that come aren't gentle. You're walking through snow that glows faintly blue, your feet bare but unfreezing. Shapes move around you, half-seen figures that breathe fog and whisper in voices that sound like cracking ice. Ahead, a fire burns without smoke, and you walk toward it, though it feels both inviting and wrong. Somewhere behind you, you hear Brynja's voice again, distant but clear. Don't stop walking, she says. Not until you wake. You do wake, sudden, breathless, heart-pounding, and find the hall still around you, the fire low but alive. The others sleep, unmoving. For a moment, you can't tell whether the dream left you or you left it. The air feels different now, denser, charged with something unseen. You glance toward the door, where frost has crept inward, delicate and white. And just there, half hidden by shadow, you swear you see the faint outline of a footprint melting slowly into the floor. You tell yourself it's nothing, just the shape of the straw, or a trick of tired eyes. But you pull the furs tighter anyway. The longhouse breathes again, softly, steadily, and you match its rhythm until sleep finds you once more. When you wake again, the light is strange, pale, cold, the kind of dawn that never really commits to being day. The fire has burned to grey ash, and the air carries that faint metallic chill that always follows deep frost. You blink slowly, listening to the room breathe. Low murmurs, the rustle of furs, the faint crack of expanding wood. For a few moments you forget where you are, until you catch sight of the rune carved into the post beside your bed. Brynja must have done that in the night. 3 short slashes intersecting, a symbol you don't know. You reach out to touch it. The wood is rough but warmer than you expect, as though something inside it still hums. You glance toward the door. Frost covers the threshold again, curling in delicate tendrils up the frame. Outside, the wind has stilled, but the silence feels thick. It's as if the world is holding its breath. A few others notice it too. They speak in whispers, eyes flicking toward the door as though expecting it to move on its own. One of the men crosses the hall, muttering about checking the traps. His wife stops him, her hand catching his sleeve. Not yet, she says quietly. Not until the sun touches the roof. You've learned enough by now not to question. Instead, you sit and listen. Brynja stirs beside the fire, her face half hidden in shadow. They walk before the light, she murmurs. The ones who don't remember, they're gone. The words hang there like smoke. No one argues. Superstition fills the space between fear and explanation. And here, that space is wide. Still, you're curious. You pull on your boots, stiff from cold, and step carefully across the floor. The boards creak under you, but the sound feels comforting. Proof that something still moves, still lives. The air bites your face as you push open the heavy door. For a heartbeat, the outside world is blinding. Snow covers everything. smooth and unbroken, except for a single trail of prints leading toward the edge of the cliff. They're too large for a child, too uneven for a man. Each impression is shallow, as if pressed by something lighter than flesh. You step closer, the crunch beneath your boots the only sound. The wind brushes past, carrying a faint hiss like distant voices. When you reach the end of the trail, it simply stops. No turn, no stumble, no sign of return, just empty snow stretching toward the frozen sea. You stand there for a long time, staring out at the horizon, where the water and sky blur together in grey. The cold gnaws at your fingers, but you can't look away. The Vikings believed that the souls of the drowned wandered the coasts in winter, searching for warmth they could no longer feel. Maybe that's all this is, a lonely echo of those stories playing tricks on your eyes. Behind you, Brynja's voice cuts through the quiet. Don't follow where the snow doesn't remember your name. You turn to see her standing in the doorway, her shawl fluttering around her like smoke. She doesn't shout, doesn't beckon, just watches until you return. Inside, she guides you to the hearth again and pours a small cup of something dark and bitter. It smells of ash and herbs. To steady the soul, she says, pressing it into your hands. You drink because refusing would feel foolish, and because the warmth in your chest feels too fragile to risk losing. The others begin their day slowly. Someone sweeps frost from the floor. Someone else grinds grain between stones. The longhouse shakes off its fear through movement, through noise. The children chase one another through the smoky light, their laughter bouncing against the beams. You can feel the world returning inch by inch, breath by breath. You catch Brynja watching the ceiling again. She traces symbols in the air, whispering words too soft to catch. You wonder what she sees that you can't. Maybe she's reading the patterns in the smoke. Maybe she's talking to the rafters the way one might speak to an old friend. Historians often debate whether figures like her were healers, witches, or simply wise women who understood the language of weather and fear. There's never been agreement. The sagas mix truth and myth too freely. Yet sitting here, watching her calm the room without saying a word, you realize the labels don't matter. What she gives them isn't magic. It's permission to believe they're safe. As the morning drifts toward noon, the air inside grows warmer, softer. The frost melts from the doorframe, dripping in slow, rhythmic beats onto the packed earth. Each drop feels like time resuming its march. You help tend the fire, stirring the coals until orange returns to the grey. The glow spreads across the floor, chasing away the last shadows clinging to the corners. Someone hums a song, low and sweet, about sailors lost at sea, finding their way home by following the northern lights. The melody threads through the air like a charm. You lean back against the wall and let your eyes close again. The warmth reaches your skin, seeps into your bones. And for the first time since the storm began, the longhouse feels peaceful, not silent, never silent, but calm in the way a heartbeat is calm after running too far. You think again of the footprints, of how they stopped at the edge of the cliff, of the voice that told you to keep walking in your dream. Maybe that's what survival is here, a promise to keep moving. Even when the world freezes around you, you open your eyes once more and watch the smoke rise from the fire, curling toward the ceiling like a spirit remembering how to leave. Outside, the sea waits. Inside, the house breathes. And somewhere between the two, you drift, awake, alive, and uncertain where the dream truly ends. The wind has gone quiet, but the silence it leaves behind feels heavier than noise. You step outside, and the world is white to the horizon. Sky and sea and land all blurred into one endless sheet of frozen breath. The fjord below lies still, the surface a patchwork of ice and black water that glints like glass under a sun too weak to warm. You pull your cloak tight, its edges stiff with frost, and breathe in air that tastes of salt and old storms. The Vikings called this kind of silence the waiting hush, the moment when nature pauses between furies, as if considering its next move. Behind you, the longhouse smokes lazily, threads of grey curling from the roof hole. The scent of last night's fire lingers in your hair, in your clothes. You stand there a while, staring out at the frozen sea, and you start to hear it. The deep, distant groan of ice shifting far below the cliffs. It's a haunting sound, a low rumble that travels through your boots and bones alike. The sea, even when trapped, never sleeps. A man trudges past carrying a spear and a coil of rope. His breath fogs before him, and his beard glitters with frost. "Checking the traps," he says. though it sounds more like a ritual than a task. You watch him descend the rocky path toward the shore, the snow swallowing the noise of his steps. The cliffs around you are high and sharp, carved by centuries of wind and wave, but even they seem smaller beneath this endless grey sky. You walk to the edge and peer down. The sea moves just enough to break the illusion of stillness. Fragments of ice drift near the rocks, clinking softly against one another. A strange, delicate music in all this harshness. Somewhere out there, the world drops into darkness, into depths no one has mapped. The Vikings believed the sea was alive, a creature with moods, hungers, and memory. They said it never forgot the faces of those it took. The thought sends a small shiver through you. You remember the footprints from yesterday, the ones that stopped at the cliff's edge. You half expect to see them again, preserved by cold, but the night's wind has erased every trace. Only the faint outline of drifts remains, rippled like the folds of a sleeping giant. The air around you hums faintly, a sound that might be wind, might be something else. You realize you've begun to hold your breath. A sudden cry startles you, a gull, its wings cutting across the pale sky like ink on parchment. It dives toward the water, vanishing into a hole between the ice, then re-emerges, shrieking triumphantly with something silver in its beak. Life persists, even here, stubborn and small. You laugh under your breath, the sound strange in the empty air. Back inside, warmth hits you like a wave. The longhouse smells of stew and smoke, of wool and human breath. Someone's patching a net near the hearth, fingers moving deftly through cords. The rhythm of it, loop, pull, tie, matches the cadence of the sea outside. These people live in sync with it, as though their pulse beats to its tides. A fisherman named Leif tells you about the whales that sometimes beach themselves along the coast during winter, stranded by ice or storm. When it happens, the whole village works for days, carving and cutting before the meat freezes solid. Every part is used, the oil for lamps, the bone for tools, the hide for rope. He says it with quiet pride, not boastfulness. Nothing the sea gives should be wasted, he adds, his eyes flicking toward the door as though afraid the ocean might hear disrespect. Historians still argue about how far these coastal people relied on the sea during the harshest months, whether it truly fed them or merely teased them with promises of life between famines. Archaeological finds show fish bones, whale oil lamps, and even shell jewelry buried with the dead, proof that the ocean wasn't just sustenance, it was identity. You can see that truth in Leif's face. He speaks of storms the way some speak of gods, distant, terrible, but necessary. You step closer to the fire and listen as the wind picks up again outside. Its whistle slides through the cracks, a mournful tune that echoes in the beams. Brynja, the old dream reader, glances up from her seat and smiles without warmth. The sea's remembering something, she murmurs. It always does. You sit down beside her, watching the firelight play against the walls. And for a moment, you imagine what it must have been like to spend your whole life here, caught between the frozen cliffs and the restless sea. Your sleep filled with the sound of waves clawing at the dark. Maybe the Vikings didn't fear death so much because they lived with its voice every night. The wind grows louder, pushing against the door, rattling the hinges. Someone adds more wood to the fire, but it feels like the warmth can't quite reach the edges of the room. The air carries that strange metallic chill again, like a reminder. You close your eyes and listen. Outside, the sea groans, deep, slow, alive. And you realize that even now, with the storm gone and the sun weakly returning, the world hasn't truly quieted. It's only catching its breath. By nightfall, the calm has turned uneasy again. The air inside the longhouse hums faintly, as though the sea's voice has found its way through the walls. You lie on your side, facing the faint orange flicker of the hearth. Every creak of wood sounds like a whisper. Every gust outside feels like breath on the back of your neck. The others are half asleep, their dreams tugging them somewhere beyond reach. But you remain awake, tracing patterns in the grain of the floor with your eyes. It's strange, this feeling of the ocean pressing on you even when you can't see it. You imagine it breathing beneath its frozen shell, flexing and sighing, testing the land's resolve. Some say the sea grows restless when the dead stir beneath it, those who drowned, or those who sailed too far from the sight of land. The sagas tell of nights when ghostly ships appeared on the horizon, their sails made of mist, their crews silent as frost. Fishermen called them dragskip, ships of the drowned. Seeing one was both curse and omen. depending on whether you believed the dead envied the living or guided them. Brynja stirs beside the fire. The old woman hasn't slept since sunset, her eyes half-lidded but alert. You watch her feed the fire with a handful of dried seaweed, and the flames flare green for an instant, lighting her face from below. The smell is sharp, salt and brine. It keeps the sea calm, she murmurs, as though explaining to herself. Fire and water understand each other. They just don't trust one another. You can't help but smile at the oddness of it, but you also don't doubt her. Every small act here is a negotiation with the elements. A boy nearby groans in his sleep. His mother touches his forehead and whispers something. A prayer, a charm, maybe both. She dips her fingers in a cup of water, then flicks the droplets toward the door. It seems strange, almost theatrical, but you've learned that gestures like these aren't for show. They're habits born from centuries of bargaining with an unpredictable world. The fire settles again, quieter now, its heartbeat steady. Shadows move across the walls like waves, slow and rhythmic. You close your eyes, but the sound of the wind won't let you drift. It rises and falls, weaving through the rafters, echoing in your ears until it almost becomes words. You can't understand them, but the tone is unmistakable. Sad, insistent, familiar. It's the same voice that called from your dream 2 nights ago. The one that told you not to stop walking. You sit up slowly, scanning the hall. Everyone is still asleep, their faces soft and peaceful in the amber light. Brynja's eyes, though half closed, flick toward you. You heard it, didn't you? She asks, her voice low. You nod without meaning to. She doesn't look surprised. It's not always wind, she says. Sometimes it's the sea remembering your name. Her words settle over you like ash. You want to laugh them off, to say you're only tired, but the sound outside continues. Low, mournful, almost human. The Vikings had a word for this. Halfmen, seamen, spirits who haunted coastlines and sang to the living. Some said they were omens of bad weather. Others believed they warned of drowned souls returning home. Archaeologists have found carvings of these figures, etched into whalebone, half man, half wave, their faces caught between beauty and sorrow. Whether they were myth or metaphor, no one agrees. Yet here, in this silence, you could almost believe they're real. The door rattles, a single sharp knock that freezes the room. Even the fire seems to pause. Brynja rises slowly, her bones creaking with the motion. She walks to the door, her hand hovering over the latch. For a heartbeat, no one breathes. Then, just as suddenly, the sound stops. The silence that follows is heavier than the knock itself. She exhales and steps back. It's nothing, she says, though her voice lacks conviction. Just the wind testing the door. You lie back down, but your pulse refuses to slow. The knock echoes in your thoughts long after it fades. Somewhere deep inside the walls, you swear you hear a faint dripping, like water sneaking through the wood. You pull the fur higher, willing sleep to come, but instead, your mind drifts to the sea again. The frozen waves, the endless dark beneath them, the way the ocean seems to breathe in rhythm with your own lungs. Historians debate whether the Vikings truly believed in such spirits, or if these tales were later embellishments, stitched into the sagas by poets long after the age of the longships ended. But belief isn't always about fact, it's about feeling. And tonight, every creak, every sigh of wind feels like proof. You open your eyes one last time. The fire is nearly gone, a faint red pulse in the dark. Across the hall, Brynja sits unmoving, her face turned toward the door. You watch her until your eyes blur from exhaustion, and at last you drift into a shallow, uneasy sleep. Outside, the sea moans once more, low, slow, patient, and if you listen closely enough, you could swear it sounds almost like laughter. The next night finds you on the edge of sleep again, this time not from the pull of dreams, but from duty. Someone nudges your shoulder and whispers your name. It's your turn to tend the fire. You sit up slowly, the furs slipping from your shoulders in a cascade of cold. The longhouse is half dark, the fire reduced to a dull shimmer under grey ash. Only a handful of others are awake. Men keeping watch by the door, faces hidden beneath hoods, their breath ghosting in the chill. You rub your eyes and stretch, bones cracking softly in protest. The world feels slower at this hour, caught in the space between exhaustion and survival. You push a log toward the embers and listen to the faint hiss as it catches. The glow spreads, then the first curl of orange licks upward. Fire makes a sound like whispering, as though pleased to be fed. You hunch close, palms out, the warmth creeping back into your skin. It's strange how the longhouse changes at night. The laughter and chatter of the day dissolve into stillness. All that remains is the rhythm of breathing, the occasional shuffle of a body turning over, the soft whine of the wind outside. You think of how many centuries this same pattern has repeated, the endless cycle of wakefulness and rest, of fire and frost. There's something humbling about realizing you're sitting in the same glow that once lit the faces of ancestors you'll never know. The man by the door shifts, his hand tightening on his spear. "Keep it low," he murmurs. Too much flame draws eyes. You nod, though you're not sure whose eyes he means. Raiders, beasts, the sea spirits Brynja whispers about, perhaps all of them. The Vikings understood that darkness wasn't merely absence, it was presence, full of things waiting to be seen. You settle into your post, feeding the fire with small pieces of wood, each chosen carefully so the crackling won't wake the children sleeping nearby. Your eyes wander to the wall where shields hang like quiet moons, their surfaces dark and scarred. The smell of tanned leather mixes with smoke and pine. For a moment you feel utterly alone, but it's not loneliness exactly. It's awareness, the kind of solitude that makes you hear your own heartbeat and the heartbeat of the house beside it. The guard near the door coughs softly. "Cold like this," he says. "Even the ravens freeze mid-flight." He smiles at his own exaggeration, but his eyes remain serious. He tells you that once, in a winter worse than this, a ship froze solid in the fjord, its crew forced to cut it free by torchlight. When dawn came, they found two men standing on the deck, still upright, frozen where they'd kept watch. The image sticks in your mind, figures caught between duty and death, too loyal even for frost to claim gently. You shiver, not entirely from the cold. Outside, the wind shifts. You can hear it dragging along the eaves, brushing against the roof like fingers across taut skin. The guard tilts his head. "Storm's turning east," he mutters. "Might bring raiders, or luck." He doesn't sound sure which would be worse. You imagine a ship slipping through that black water, its sail catching faint moonlight, its crew moving like ghosts. Somewhere beyond that horizon, another fire burns in another longhouse, another watcher fighting the same sleep. Historians still debate whether Viking watch shifts like this were common in domestic settings, or just in camps and voyages. Some claim families took turns guarding fires through winter, while others argue such vigilance was only for expeditions. Looking at the way these people live, you sense that watchfulness is simply part of being alive here. Every night is a border between safety and loss. Brynja stirs from her corner and joins you, her footsteps silent. She kneels beside the fire, studying the flames. "You hear them?" She whispers. You listen, frowning. "The sparks," she says. "They speak if you know the tongue." She tosses a pinch of salt into the flames, and they flare bright blue, spitting with tiny pops. "That's them laughing," she adds with a sly smile. You chuckle softly, unsure whether she's joking, but the sound comforts you. For a while, the two of you sit in silence, watching the sparks drift upward and vanish. The air feels softer here, warmer. You think about how strange it is that something so small, bits of wood and fire, can hold back a world of cold and dark. You add another log, careful not to wake the sleepers, and the fire hums contentedly, its light catching in Brynja's eyes. Outside, the wind moans again, but this time it sounds different, less like rage, more like a distant song. You look toward the door and think of the sea beyond, the endless expanse where watchmen on ships must be doing exactly what you're doing now, keeping the light alive. You feel connected to them somehow, to all the silent sentinels who've ever stayed awake so others could dream. And so you stay there, guarding both fire and quiet, until the first hint of dawn glows faintly in the smoke hole above. Thin, grey and beautiful, the sky begins to pale, but the cold refuses to loosen its hold. You watch the faint light bleed into the longhouse, thin as watered milk, hesitant as a whisper. The fire, though smaller now, still breathes. Its glow paints the room in soft golds and ambers, touching faces that stir awake one by one. You realize that dawn here isn't triumph. It's simply another hour of endurance. You stretch your back and glance at Brynja. She's still awake, her gaze distant, fixed on the crack of light crawling down the far wall. "The night's work is done," she murmurs, "but the day's only begun to ask for its price." She stands with effort, wrapping her shawl tight, and moves toward the door. You rise to follow, curiosity tugging you forward. When she opens it, The cold outside slams into you like a wall, sharp, merciless, immediate. The landscape glitters, brittle and still. Every rock, every blade of grass is crusted in frost. The fjord lies half frozen, its edges catching the dim light like shards of broken glass. You step out beside her, boots crunching through the top layer of snow. The air burns your throat. You can hear the ice groaning beneath the surface of the water. A low, steady pulse, the sound of something ancient stirring beneath restraint. From this height, the village looks fragile. Wisps of smoke rise from a handful of roofs, curling upward like prayers that freeze before reaching the sky. In the distance, you can see a line of figures moving along the shoreline. Men checking nets, hauling baskets, faces wrapped in fur. Even from here, you can tell the sea hasn't been kind. The baskets hang heavy with seaweed and little else. Brynja follows your gaze and sighs. When the ocean grows silent, she says, it's because it's hiding something. You think of the watchers from the night before, of how they guarded the hearth as though guarding a heartbeat. Now in the light, it seems almost futile. The world is too vast, too indifferent. Yet you also understand that vigilance isn't about winning. It's about continuing. Back inside, the longhouse wakes in slow waves. The air fills with the smell of fish broth and smoke, of damp wool steaming near the fire. Someone laughs softly. Someone else curses as a frozen bucket slips from their hands. You see the man from last night's watch kneeling near the doorway, rubbing wax into the wood to seal the cracks against the wind. His movements are patient, reverent. In this place, care is a form of prayer. A group of younger men prepare to leave for the day's hunt, adjusting their belts and wiping frost from their beards. They joke quietly among themselves. But beneath the humor, there's a heaviness, a quiet knowledge that luck is a thin blanket in weather like this. They nod to you as they pass, and one offers a crooked grin. If we're not back by sundown, he says, tell the sea we were smiling. Then he's gone, footsteps fading into the snow. Brynja sits by the fire again, her hands busy with a small leather pouch. She pulls out bits of iron, nails, scraps of old tools, and arranges them in a circle on the floor. Protection, she says without looking up. From what? You ask. She shrugs. Anything that remembers our names when it shouldn't. The words send a faint shiver through you, but there's something steadying in her calm. Superstition, logic, faith. It all blends together here until you can't tell one from the other. Historians still argue over whether such night watches were rooted in real danger or in shared anxiety born from isolation. Some suggest they served as early fire patrols, practical responses to the constant threat of smoke and embers. Others see them as spiritual rituals, inherited from older pagan customs of warding off the dark. But here, in this moment, those distinctions mean nothing. Watching, tending, enduring, it's all the same work. As morning stretches on, you pour yourself a cup of warm water and sit by the doorway, letting the light reach your face. It's pale and weak, but it feels earned. You think about the men still walking the coast, about the women stirring stew, and the children chasing hens through the smoke. This world is a fragile one, yes, but it's held together by hands that refuse to stop working, by eyes that refuse to close completely, by the small, defiant act of keeping the fire alive. The day continues, long and quiet. The sea hums somewhere beyond the horizon, waiting for its next turn to speak. You realize that in this land, there is no true rest, only turns in an endless circle of watching and waking. And maybe that's what life has always been here. A shared promise whispered in the dark, a vow to keep the light burning no matter how long the night becomes. You lean back against the doorframe, eyelids heavy. The warmth of the fire brushes your skin, and the faint rhythm of the waves beyond lulls you towards sleep. Just before you drift off, you hear Brynja's voice again, soft but certain. You've done your watch well, she says. Now let the sea keep its own. Outside, the horizon brightens. Inside, the longhouse breathes. And for the briefest moment, the world feels balanced. Cold and warmth, dark and dawn, sea and flame, all holding each other in a fragile, beautiful truce. The snow outside the longhouse crunches beneath your boots, soft but sharp, each step echoing faintly against the stone cliffs. It's morning again. Grey, cold, and quiet, except for the soft rush of the tide breaking through thin ice. You wrap your cloak closer, tucking your chin down against the wind. Your breath rises like smoke, twisting away into the endless white. Somewhere in the distance, a gull calls, a lonely sound, almost human in its weariness. Today feels gentler, though not by much. The wind has slowed to a sigh instead of a scream, and the sun peers over the mountains like a shy guest unsure whether it's welcome. You walk toward the drying racks near the shore, where strips of fish hang stiff and silver. The smell hits first, sharp, salty, and strong enough to make your eyes water. You wrinkle your nose, but the man standing nearby just laughs. "Better than dying hungry," he says, tossing another fish onto the rack. His name is Torvald, a wiry man with hands scarred from rope burns and frostbite. He hums as he works, a low tune that sounds almost like a sea shanty, something sailors might have sung to steady their oars. He gestures for you to help, handing you a bundle of wool socks, thick, grey, hand-spun. "Wives made these," he says. "They'll dry faster here." You hang them beside the fish, where the sea air can draw out the moisture. The socks are still damp from washing, but warm to the touch. You imagine the women sitting by the fire at night, their fingers moving in rhythm, knitting patterns passed down for generations. Some weave small runes into the cuffs, symbols for luck, for safe passage, for warmth that lasts longer than wool should. The idea makes you smile. Even in something as ordinary as a sock, the Vikings stitch their prayers. The socks will stiffen by nightfall, Torvald tells you, but the warmth will return once they're worn again. "You'll see," he adds with a wink. "They remember feet that walked." You laugh, though there's a peculiar poetry to the way he says it. Here, even the smallest objects seem to hold memory. Cloth, wood, stone, all carrying whispers of those who shaped them. The air around you is crisp, the kind that makes your skin ache before you realize you're alive. You crouch beside a wooden tub where chunks of ice float in a stew of water and salt. Women rinse wool there, beating it against flat stones to clean away the grime. The rhythm of their work matches the slow slap of the tide. One of them looks up at you with a grin. "Wool smells worse before it smells better," she says, her accent thick and musical. You nod, pretending not to cough at the sharpness of it. The wool releases an oily sheen across the water's surface, the natural lanolin that keeps it waterproof. You realize it's this same oil that gives their clothes that faint, earthy scent you've come to associate with warmth itself. Inside the longhouse, laughter bubbles through the cracks in the door. Children chase one another around the fire, their feet thudding against the packed earth. Someone plucks at a lyre, the notes clear but trembling, half lost in the smoke. It's the kind of sound that doesn't fill the silence so much as shape it. You step inside again, drawn by the smell of stew and the promise of warmth. The interior glows softly, light filtering through thin openings in the roof. The walls still drip from melting frost, the sound steady as a heartbeat. A few men sit near the hearth, mending nets by lamplight. One hums the same tune Torvald sang outside. Another adds words, something about a whale guiding sailors home through fog. It's a lullaby, disguised as a sea song, and soon the whole room seems to sway with it. You find your place by the fire and stretch your hands toward the flames. Your socks, damp from the morning, steam gently, filling the air with the familiar scent of wool and salt. Brynja sits across from you, her gaze distant, her lips moving silently. When you ask what she's saying, she smiles faintly. "It's a song for the sea," she says, "to remind it we're still listening." Historians still argue about whether Vikings used songs as navigation tools, or simply for comfort during long voyages. Some suggest that rhythm itself served as a kind of compass, oars striking in time, breath syncing with wind and wave. You can see the logic in that. Even here, far from any ship, life seems to move in beats and measures, each sound tethered to another. You lean back against the wooden post, letting the warmth settle into your bones. Outside, the world remains frozen and uncertain, but inside, there's rhythm. Fire crackling, wool steaming, voices rising and falling like tides. Torvald's laughter drifts through the doorway again, and for a brief moment, the cold feels like part of the music, rather than its enemy. You close your eyes, letting the melody and the fire blur together. Somewhere deep in your chest, you can still feel the ocean's hum, slow and patient. Maybe this is what the Vikings meant when they said the sea had a soul. Not a god, not a monster, but a rhythm that lives in everything it touches. Later that afternoon, the wind returns, not angry, not wild, but steady, like the pulse of something that has remembered your existence. The longhouse creaks with every gust, yet there's comfort in the sound now, as if the walls themselves are speaking softly to reassure everyone inside. You're sitting by the hearth, your feet wrapped in those newly dried wool socks Torvald gave you. They're still rough against your skin, but the warmth they hold feels earned, like something passed down rather than merely owned. A pot simmers over the fire, sending up curls of steam that smell of fish, herbs, and something faintly sweet. Honey, maybe traded from a southern merchant months ago. A woman stirs it lazily, humming the same song Brynja sang earlier. The tune weaves through the crackle of flame and the low murmur of conversation, its rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Every note seems to fill the gaps left by winter's silence. The men return from the coast as the light begins to fade. Their boots crunch against the packed snow outside, then stomp on the threshold as they shake off the cold. Torvald is among them, beard glittering with frost. He grins when he sees you, then holds up his catch. 2 fat cod, frozen stiff but shining silver in the lamplight. The sea's still generous, he says. Someone laughs and claps him on the shoulder, and for a moment the hall feels alive again. The cod are cleaned quickly, their scales flashing like coins. The smell is sharp and briny but oddly comforting. A scent that says survival more than anything else. You watch as the fish are laid across a flat stone near the fire to thaw, steam rising as the ice melts away. Food for the gods, someone jokes, though everyone knows no gods eat here. Only people who work and wait and endure. Brynja watches the process in silence. When the fish begin to sizzle faintly, she closes her eyes and murmurs something under her breath. A blessing, perhaps, or a conversation with whatever spirits she still believes guard the hearth. She takes a pinch of salt from a small pouch and sprinkles it over the flames, and they flare briefly in acknowledgement. You catch her eye, and she gives you a knowing smile. Even the sea needs thanks, she says softly. You eat together, sharing the simple meal as though it were a feast. The cod flakes apart easily, its warmth chasing the chill from your hands. The broth is salty, thick, and smoky from the fire. Every bite feels like a memory of summer hidden inside winter's mouth. When the bowls are empty, no one rushes to fill the silence. The air hums with the quiet contentment that only hunger satisfied can bring. Outside, the wind carries faint sounds. Waves brushing against ice. A distant gull's cry. The groan of wood from ships shifting in their moorings. You think of the men who must have spent nights at sea in weather like this, sleeping in their cloaks beneath frozen stars. The Vikings were said to sing to the ocean during voyages, their voices rising and falling with the oars. Some scholars believe those songs were practical, helping them row in rhythm, but others think they were acts of respect, a way of keeping peace with the water that could so easily swallow them. Listening to the wind now, you can hear that same melody, faint but persistent, as if the sea still remembers their voices. Torvald breaks the quiet first. You know, he says, stretching out his legs, the sea talks to those who listen. Not with words, never that, but with rhythm. He taps his fingers on the bench, matching the slow pulse of the wind outside. It tells you when to leave, when to wait, when to beg for mercy. You watch his hands, hypnotized by the motion, and you realize he's right. There's a pattern in everything here. Fire, waves, breath, all keeping time together, even in sleep. Brynja nods slowly, and sometimes, she adds, it sings back what we forget. The room falls quiet again. No one laughs at her words. They hang in the air, soft and heavy as falling snow. You wonder what it would mean for the sea to sing back, to remember what people have lost, to echo the lives it once took. Maybe the Vikings didn't fear the ocean because they believed it never truly ended things. It simply changed the shape of them. You lean against the wall, feeling the heat of the fire press into your back. Outside, the wind shifts, humming a deeper tone. Inside, people begin to settle again, pulling furs over their shoulders, eyes closing one by one. You sit a while longer, listening to the mingling rhythms, the fire, the breath, the distant sea. The sound of it fills you, soft and endless, until it feels like your own pulse has joined the music. Before you lie down, Brynja looks up at you from her corner, her voice barely above a whisper. Remember, she says, the sea hears everything. You nod, unsure if it's comfort or warning, then pull the furs around your shoulders. The room dims, the last flames shrinking to embers. The sound of the ocean lulls you again, steady and ancient, and as your eyes drift shut, you swear you can hear the faint rhythm of a song carried on the wind, one made of water, fire and memory, still keeping its time. You wake to the sound of hooves crunching snow outside the longhouse. It's a sharp, rhythmic sound, unlike the dull whisper of the sea or the usual morning chatter of livestock. People stir quickly, furs shifting, voices rising in uncertain tones. Even Brynja looks up from her spot by the hearth, her expression unreadable. The door creaks open and a gust of icy air tumbles through, carrying with it the scent of pine, wet leather, and something else. Iron. A rider stands framed in the doorway, snow caked across his boots and cloak. His breath clouds the air, and his horse snorts behind him, shaking frost from its mane. He's young, though winter has already carved hard lines into his face. Around his neck, a pendant glints, a silver hammer, simple but unmistakable. Everyone inside knows what that means. He's a messenger from the Jarl. The longhouse quiets. Even the fire seems to hush itself, its crackle softening to a low murmur. The messenger steps inside, pulling back his hood. His eyes sweep the room, quick, practiced, assessing. "I bring word from the Jarl," he says, his voice hoarse but steady. There's been movement along the coast. Traders from the east sighted ships, too many to count. No sails, only shadows. A murmur ripples through the room. The older men exchange glances, their jaws tightening. Someone mutters about ghosts, another about raiders. The messenger shakes his head. "Not raiders," he says. "Drift ships. No men aboard. The sea's carrying them west." The words land like stones. Drift ships. Vessels found adrift, their crews vanished. Sometimes frozen in place, sometimes gone altogether. They're omens no one wants to speak of. Proof that the sea doesn't always give back what it takes. You feel the temperature drop, though the fire still burns. The messenger moves closer to it, holding out his hands as if thawing them, but his eyes stay on the floor. "The Jarl sends warning," he continues. "Keep fires burning at night. Keep watch near the shore. And if the tide brings anything in, anything at all, do not touch it." Brynja rises, her shawl falling loose from her shoulders. "The sea's restless," she murmurs, more to herself than anyone else. It's remembering too much at once. Her gaze drifts toward the door, where the wind claws faintly at the wood. "Did he say where they came from?" she asks. The messenger hesitates, then shakes his head. Only that they were carved in the old style, before the kings, before the crosses. A silence follows so complete you can hear the faint hiss of melting frost dripping from the beams. One of the fishermen crosses himself instinctively, then catches himself and folds his hands instead. No one wants to invite the gods into this conversation. Not the new ones, and not the old. Torvald breaks the tension with a snort. "Drift ships," he says. "Always stories before winter ends. Maybe the east wind's blowing too many dreams our way." He means to sound light, but the tightness around his eyes betrays him. He looks to you for agreement, but you can only shrug. The image has already sunk too deep. The idea of empty ships sliding through black water, creaking, whispering, carrying nothing but cold air and unanswered questions. Outside, the horse snorts again, impatient to leave. The messenger bows his head to the chieftain of the house, accepts a horn of mead, and drains it in one long swallow. When he lowers it, his hands tremble slightly, though he hides it well. "The Jarl says we're to be ready for anything," he adds. "Even ghosts." Brynja chuckles softly, a dry sound like wood splintering. "The sea's always full of ghosts," she says. "They just choose when to show themselves." He gives a curt nod, then steps back into the cold. The door shuts behind him with a hollow thud, and the sound echoes through the longhouse long after the wind swallows him whole. For a moment, no one moves. Then the chieftain clears his throat and mutters orders. "More wood. Double the guard tonight." The men rise, faces grim. You help Torvald drag a pile of split logs closer to the fire, the motion grounding you in the simplicity of labor. The crackle of flame feels louder now, urgent, as though even it understands the weight of the messenger's warning. Historians still debate whether such drift ships truly existed or were born from fear and folklore. Some claim they were real, abandoned vessels pushed west by currents after storms claimed their crews. Others believe they were metaphors, symbols of death and transition in Norse oral tradition. But sitting here, feeling the hush that follows the messenger's words, you can't see how anyone could mistake the power of a story like that. Real or not, the image carries truth. The sea takes, and it never explains. As the day fades into dusk, preparations begin. Torvald sharpens his axe. Others hang shields along the walls. Brynja ties bits of iron into bundles of dried herbs, hanging them from the rafters with quiet prayers. When you ask what they're for, she says. Not protection, recognition. If the old ones walk, they should know we remember them kindly. The fire burns higher now, its light sharp against the faces of those gathered. Outside, the wind has turned again, blowing from the east. You can smell salt, heavy and cold, as if the tide itself is creeping closer. And somewhere out there, beyond the cliffs, beyond the ice, you imagine a fleet of empty ships drifting through the fog, their timbers groaning with the weight of silence. You picture them moving slow and steady, like thoughts that refuse to die, and you can almost hear the creak of their oars, rowing no one home. Night comes quickly, pressing itself against the longhouse walls as though eager to listen in. The fire burns taller than usual, its heat heavy and uneven, throwing shadows that flicker like restless figures along the beams. Everyone feels the change, subtle but sure, as though the air itself has thickened. Even laughter sounds strained, forced between clenched teeth. You sit near the hearth again, hands extended toward the flames, watching how the smoke moves in slow ribbons toward the smoke hole. It doesn't rise straight anymore. It bends, curling toward the door as if drawn. Outside, the sea moans under the weight of wind. Every few moments, a gust shakes the thatch and sends loose frost tumbling down from the rafters. The animals in the corner stir uneasily, the goats shifting their hooves, the dog whining low in its throat. You glance at Brynja, who sits beside the door with her shawl drawn tight, staring into the dark crack between the planks. Her lips move, but no sound escapes. Torvald paces near the wall, checking his axe again, though there's no real threat he can name. We should see the coast, he says finally. If the tide's bringing ghosts, better we meet them standing than waiting. The chieftain shakes his head. Not tonight. We hold ground. His voice carries the kind of authority that brooks no argument, yet Torvald's jaw tightens. And if the tide brings them to the door, he asks. Then we bar it, the chieftain answers, and pray the hinges remember their craft. The words spark a few dry chuckles, though no one truly laughs. You notice how everyone's eyes drift toward the door more often now, as if expecting it to move. The air feels taut, like a bowstring drawn too far. You decide to keep yourself busy. Reaching for a poker, you stir the fire, pushing the embers together until they glow brighter. Sparks leap up, tiny stars that vanish before touching the roof. The light spills across the floor, catching on the iron charms Brynja hung earlier. They sway gently with each breath of wind, ringing faintly like the memory of distant bells. The dog lifts its head suddenly, ears pricking. A moment later, you hear it too, a faint sound from outside, rhythmic and wrong. It's not the wind, it's too measured for that. Thud, pause, thud, a sound like wood brushing against rock, then silence. Everyone freezes, Brynja's eyes narrow, her fingers twitching in the air as if counting heartbeats. Don't move, she whispers. It's listening! The sound comes again, closer this time, scraping and slow. The hairs rise along your arms. You glance toward the chieftain, but he holds up a hand, silencing even the breath around him. Another thud follows, then a hollow creak, unmistakable, wood straining. A ship's sound, only there's no harbour here, just a cliff that drops into black water. Torvald steps toward the door before anyone can stop him. If it's driftwood, he says, voice tight, it'll freeze by morning. I'll bring it in before it's lost. He grips the latch, but Brynja's voice slices through the quiet. Touch nothing the sea carries in, she says sharply. Not until dawn. Her eyes meet his, steady and fierce. You don't know what's steering it. Historians still debate how much truth lives in these tales of the haunted ships the Norse spoke of. The vessels that return from storms unmanned yet intact, drifting ashore with oars still lashed and sails torn by unseen hands. Some call them symbols, metaphors for grief or loss. Others suggest they were real, relics of wrecked expeditions, carried home by current and chance. Yet in a night like this, you can feel how belief becomes reality, how fear finds shape when the sea itself starts to sound like breath. The thudding stops. The silence that follows is worse. It hangs heavy and thick, pressing on your ears until you can hear only your own heartbeat. Then faintly, another sound, a tapping, softer, more deliberate. It comes not from the door, but from the wall behind you, low near the floor, like knuckles on wood. You turn slowly, breath shallow. The sound repeats 3 times, perfectly spaced. Brynja rises, her shawl slipping down her shoulders. It's not asking to come in, she says. It's remembering how. The The chieftain grips his spear tighter, but she waves him off. Don't greet it, she warns. Don't name it. Names make doors. Her voice cracks slightly on the last word, but no one moves to question her. The fire pops suddenly, sending sparks high, and the tapping stops as abruptly as it began. For a long while, no one speaks. The wind moans through the cracks, the flames hiss and settle, and slowly, the tension begins to loosen its claws. One by one, people return to their seats, pretending calm. Torvald sits last, his face pale under the firelight. He mutters something about ghosts being cowards, but the tremor in his hands betrays him. You lie back down eventually, though sleep feels impossible. Every sound seems amplified. The drip of thawing ice, the sigh of the wind, the faint crackle of firewood. Yet somewhere between wakefulness and exhaustion, you drift. Your dreams are thick and cold. You're standing on the shore, the tide pulling at your feet. A ship drifts toward you, its sail shredded, its hull black with frost. There's no crew aboard, only the slow creak of the mast, bowing as if in greeting. When you wake, dawn is bleeding faintly through the smoke hole. The door is still barred, untouched, but near the threshold, where the frost gathers thickest, there's a single wet footprint, half melted, half formed, pointing inward. Brynja sees it first. She kneels beside it, tracing the edge without touching. The sea remembers, she whispers. Her voice carries no fear this time, only certainty. And for the first time since the messenger's warning, you believe her. By the following dusk, the fear has settled into the timbers like damp. No one mentions the footprint, yet every eye strays toward the door whenever the wind shifts. You can feel the unease pulsing quietly through the longhouse, the way voices drop a little lower, the way laughter breaks too soon. Still, work must be done. That is the Viking way. Torvald is mending a broken net by the fire, his hands steady now, though his jaw still tightens at every gust. Across from him, two women knead rye dough on a low table, the rhythm of their fists steady, deliberate. The scent of baking bread thickens the air, warm and faintly sweet, a small defiance against the frost that still grips the land. Brynja hums as she threads a new charm into the rafters, one shaped from driftwood and iron nails. She says it keeps away the forgotten ones. Nobody asks which forgotten ones she means. You step outside to fetch more firewood, and the evening air stings your cheeks. The sky is bruised purple, streaked with ash-colored clouds that hang low over the sea. The horizon blurs where snow meets water. It's impossible to tell where the world ends. You pause a moment, breathing in the clean, punishing cold. Far below, the surf beats a slow rhythm against the rocks, like the world's oldest drum. The path to the woodpile winds behind the longhouse, half buried under drifts. You dig your boots through it, your breath fogging the air in steady bursts. Halfway there you stop. The sea's voice is louder here, closer. It's not just the usual crash and sigh. There's a new undertone, deep and resonant, almost melodic. It rises and falls like a chant. For a heartbeat, you think it's people singing. Then you remember there are no people out there, only ice. When you return inside, your face burning from cold, Brynja looks up from her work. You heard them, didn't you? She asks softly, as though reading your thoughts. You hesitate. The waves, you say finally. She shakes her head. No, the ones beneath them. She smiles faintly at your confusion. The sea keeps voices. It never loses a sound, only layers them until we mistake memory for wind. You can't decide whether she's comforting or terrifying. Still, you sit near her, drawn to her calm. The firelight plays across her face, tracing the deep lines that look like rivers on a map. Once, she begins, long before these coasts had names, people left offerings at the edge of the ice, not for gods, but for the drowned. Bits of bread, a sip of ale, sometimes even a carved toy for a lost child. They said it made the storms softer, the nights shorter. She shrugs. Now we offer silence instead. The sea accepts that too. The bread finishes baking, and someone cuts it into rough slices. The crust cracks like ice when you break it, but the inside steams, soft and fragrant. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth spreading from your chest outward. It's strange how something so simple, grain, water, salt, can feel like armor. Every bite steadies your pulse. You wonder how many winters this same act has carried people through. Torvald lifts a piece of bread toward the door before taking his own. For those who didn't come home, he says quietly. The gesture is small, but it feels right. The others nod, and for a few moments no one speaks. Only the sound of chewing, The steady crackle of fire and the soft hiss of wind through the rafters fill the air. Historians sometimes argue that the Vikings feared the sea more than they worshipped it. But watching them now, the reverence in their silence, the instinctive gestures of respect, you can see the truth is more complex. It's not fear, not quite faith either. It's coexistence. The sea is both grave and giver, enemy and kin. To live here is to accept that every blessing comes with a bite. Outside, darkness deepens. The horizon disappears entirely, swallowed by the stormless night. Brynja finishes her charm and ties it above the door. The shape sways gently, clinking with each draft. If they come again, she says, they'll know they're remembered. You nod, not asking who they are. Some questions in this place feel like doors you shouldn't open. Instead, you add another log to the fire, watching the flames flare brighter, painting the walls gold. The warmth feels different tonight. Fiercer, almost defiant. You lie down later, pulling the fur over your shoulders, listening as the wind hums through the cracks. Somewhere beneath it, you can still hear the faint echo of the sea's chant, slow and distant. You tell yourself it's only waves shifting under ice. Yet, even as you drift towards sleep, part of you listens for the rhythm. Half afraid, half comforted. That steady pulse of something alive beneath the silence. The night drags long and brittle. You wake several times, unsure whether hours or minutes have passed. The fire still breathes, faint and red, its warmth clinging weakly to the edges of the room. The silence outside has grown thick again, too even, too deliberate. It feels like the world has paused just beyond the door. You rise quietly, careful not to wake anyone, and move toward the entrance. The air smells of wood smoke and brine. The floor is cold under your boots. You lift the bar from the door and open it a crack. The cold that spills in bites like a blade. The sky is black glass, scattered with pale trembling stars. For a moment everything seems still. Then, from somewhere far below the cliffs, a sound rises. Low, harmonic, and impossibly human. It's singing. Not words you can understand, but long drawn-out tones, shifting like waves themselves. The melody swells and breaks, echoes rolling through the fjord until it feels like the earth itself is humming. You freeze, breath caught halfway in your chest. The sound isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It fills you without force, without warning, threading itself into your heartbeat. Brynja's hand finds your shoulder. You hadn't even heard her approach. Close it, she whispers, voice trembling just slightly. It's not for us tonight. You glance at her and see tears frozen in her lashes, catching the faint firelight behind you. There's no fear in her expression, only awe, and the kind of sadness reserved for something that cannot be stopped. You obey, pushing the door shut until it thuds softly into place. The latch drops, and the sound of the singing fades to a faint hum, still audible through the wood. The longhouse seems to exhale around you. Behind, the sleepers stir restlessly, some murmuring in their dreams. The dog whines and presses its nose against your leg, tail tucked. Brynja moves toward the fire and crouches beside it, feeding it small sticks, one at a time. They sing when the ice breaks, she says. Not for us, for the ones beneath. Her voice is almost tender. Every thaw brings a remembering. You sink beside her, staring into the flames. The singing continues, low and constant. You've heard it before? You ask. She nods slowly. Twice. Once as a girl, when my father was taken by the sea. Again the winter I buried my son. It sounds different every time, but it always says the same thing. What's that? You ask. She looks at you, eyes catching the firelight. That nothing stays buried forever. A shiver crawls up your spine. You glance at the others, faces dimly lit, all turned toward the hearth as if drawn by instinct. The song outside deepens, vibrating through the ground. The walls seem to hum in sympathy, the wooden beams groaning as though echoing a memory of their own. You can almost imagine the longhouse itself singing softly in answer. Torvald stirs awake, sitting up abruptly. You hear that? He asks, voice thick with sleep. It's only wind, someone mutters, unwilling to give shape to the truth. But Torvald shakes his head. No, it's a call. I know that sound. He stands, staggering a little, and grabs his cloak. Before anyone can stop him, he's at the door. Brynja's hand lifts but falls back uselessly. Let him go, she says quietly. Some debts are older than reason. The door opens, and a flood of cold air rushes in. Torvald steps out, the fur collar of his cloak whipping in the wind. For a heartbeat, he's framed by moonlight and the faint shimmer of snow. Then he's gone. The door swings shut behind him, the bar dropping into place as if by its own weight. You rush to the small window slit and peer through it. The shoreline glows faintly under the moon, silver light spilling over the ice. You can see him walking toward the cliffs, slow but sure, the snow swirling around him. Below, the sea moves, a dark shape shifting under thin ice. The singing grows louder, resonating through your chest until your ribs ache. He stops near the edge, head tilted like a man listening for his name. Then the ice beneath him cracks, not sharply, but with a long, soft sigh. The sound merges with the melody. For a moment, he stands in that fragile balance between solid and void, between breath and memory. Then he steps forward, and the sea takes him quietly, almost kindly. The song stops. Silence floods back, heavy and absolute. You realize your hands are shaking. Brynja is already kneeling by the fire, whispering words you don't know. No one else moves. The world feels frozen in more ways than one. Historians sometimes write of sea burials and ice sacrifices, unsure whether these were ritual or accident. They search the bones, the layers of sediment, for evidence of intent. But standing here, feeling the echo of that impossible song fading into stillness, you understand it was never about proof. It was about belonging to the earth, to the sea, to the endless cold conversation between the two. Brynja looks up finally, her face pale but calm. "He's home now," she says. And though the words sound final, there's no grief in them, only acceptance. You sit beside her, staring into the fire until dawn leaks through the cracks of the roof. Soft and grey, the world outside has gone silent again, but the sea's rhythm lingers beneath your skin, a quiet thrum that won't fade. When morning comes, the ice at the cliff's edge gleams unbroken. No footprints, no cracks, no sign of Torvald. Only the faint scent of salt in the wind, sharp and eternal. Morning bleeds into grey. The kind of light that hides more than it reveals spills through the smoke hole, turning every face in the longhouse pale and distant. No one has spoken since Torvald vanished. There's no body to mourn, no grave to mark, only an emptiness that has settled into the rhythm of breath. The fire still burns, but even its warmth feels muted, as though the sea itself has stolen some of it back. You sit near the doorway, tracing the lines in the frost that creep along the wood. Outside, the wind has softened, though the air carries a strange echo, like sound returning from far-off cliffs. Brynja moves about quietly, gathering herbs and binding them with strips of wool. Her voice hums low, tuneless yet steady, something to fill the silence. You realize she's humming for Torvald, her tone neither sad nor fearful, just resolute, as though she's guiding him through whatever lies beyond the horizon. The others go about their work with forced normalcy. The women knead dough, the men repair tools, the children whisper games in corners. It's not denial, it's endurance. To live here means accepting that the sea takes what it will, and the living must keep moving to avoid being taken next. You decide to step outside. The air hits you hard, crisp, salt-sharp, and clean in a way that feels cruel. The ocean lies stretched before you, vast and indifferent, its surface a fractured mirror of ice and shadow. The cliffs below glisten with frozen spray. Nothing moves except the water itself, restless under its frozen skin. And yet, something draws you closer. You follow the narrow path that winds down toward the shoreline, your boots crunching through frost. Every step feels heavier the farther you go. The smell of salt grows stronger, mingling with the faint metallic scent of ice. You can hear the sea breathing beneath its armor, a low, sighing pulse, patient and endless. When you reach the edge, you see it, a piece of driftwood caught between two rocks, pale and smooth, almost bone-like. It shouldn't be there. The tide hasn't been high enough. You crouch, hesitating, remembering Brynja's warning, never touch what the sea carries in. But curiosity outweighs caution. You reach out, fingertips grazing its frozen surface. It's colder than anything you've ever felt. The cold so pure it burns. The moment you touch it, the world goes utterly silent. The wind stops. Even the sea seems to hold its breath. Then, faintly, you hear it. A single note, deep and resonant, rising through the ice like a heartbeat. You yank your hand back, stumbling to your feet. The sound fades as quickly as it came, leaving only the whisper of waves. You glance down again, and the driftwood is gone. By the time you climb back to the longhouse, the light has changed. Thicker, more yellow, as though the sun has decided to return for a while. Brynja meets you at the door, her eyes sharp. "You went near the shore," she says, not a question. You nod. "I heard something." She studies you for a long moment, then sighs. "You shouldn't have touched it," she says softly. The sea never forgets who listens. Inside, the warmth feels distant, as though the cold followed you in. The others talk quietly, trading stories about Torvald's bravery, his foolishness, his laughter. They speak as though he's away on a long voyage, rather than gone forever. One man mentions that the ice near the cliffs cracked differently this morning, cleaner, brighter. Brynja only shakes her head. "It's his way home," she murmurs. Historians often describe Viking mourning as pragmatic, almost stoic. There were no elaborate rituals for the lost at sea, no graves to tend. Instead, memory became the marker, a place held open in the mind, carried from one winter to the next. Sitting here, you understand that better than any book could explain. Grief here isn't spoken, it's woven into the rhythm of survival. That evening, as twilight slides over the coast, you notice the fire burns clearer, steadier. The smoke rises straight again, the scent clean and wood-sweet. It's as if the house itself has decided to breathe easier. Brynja sits beside the flames, her eyes half closed, and hums the same melody you heard on the shore. The tune is softer now, warmer, as though it's changed shape in her mouth. You join her without realizing, your voice tentative at first, then stronger. Others follow, one by one, until the longhouse fills with sound. No words, only tone, weaving together like the threads of a single thought. The fire swells, casting gold light against the walls, and the wind outside seems to quiet in respect. It's not a song for the dead, you realize. It's for the living, for the ones who must sleep beside an ocean that never stops remembering. The melody carries something of both fear and hope, a balance that feels achingly human. You close your eyes and sing until your voice breaks, until the ache in your chest softens into warmth. When the last note fades, Brynja smiles faintly. "That's how we keep them," she says. "Not in graves, in sound." You nod, and as the fire settles into its steady glow, you understand. Even here, on this wind-beaten coast, life isn't measured by how you sleep through the cold, but by how you keep singing against it. That night, no one dares sleep early. The air feels clearer, yet something in it keeps everyone hovering near the fire. The longhouse glows like a lantern against the dark, its roof breathing smoke into the low clouds. You sit close to the hearth, again, the warmth painting your face while frost crawls along the edges of the door. The rhythm of daily life continues, grinding grain, feeding animals, mending tools. But each movement is slower, quieter, as though the whole household is still listening for echoes from the sea. Brynja hums while she sorts herbs. Her voice, rough and low, reminds you of the wind threading through pine. Children press near her knees, pretending not to listen, but memorizing every word. She speaks softly of a time when people would burn juniper branches before sleep to invite good dreams. The smoke, she says, kept away cold spirits and soothed the mind. Someone laughs gently and tosses a few needles into the fire. They crackle, releasing a scent sharp enough to sting your eyes. Later, when the chores are finished, the chieftain sits on the long bench, and lifts a carved cup. To Torvald, he says, his voice carrying just enough to reach everyone. He kept watch, and he'll keep it still. The toast is simple, without ceremony, yet everyone answers with a quiet murmur and drinks. The sound of mead swallowing through throats is almost musical. Afterward, talk turns to stories. A young man named Eirik begins one about a traveller who followed the northern lights and found a city made of ice. His voice is nervous at first, but as the tale builds, of halls glowing blue, of spirits frozen mid-song, the listeners lean closer. The children's eyes shine. Brynja smiles faintly. Every tale, she says when he finishes, is a warmth you pass forward. Keep telling them, or the dark wins. Her words settle into you. You realize this is how memory lives here, not in carvings or stones, but in stories told until they feel like truth. Maybe that's why the sagas survived the centuries. Each one was another spark in a long shared fire. The hours stretch. The wind outside softens to a whisper. You lie back against the firs, feeling the warmth seep slowly into your bones. The firelight flickers across the rafters, making the shadows dance. You close your eyes, listening to the breathing of the room. Steady, human, alive. The quiet is deep enough that you can hear your own pulse, slow and even. For the first time in nights, the silence feels like rest rather than warning. You dream, not of the sea but of light. A long dawn spilling across the snow, melting the frost from rooftops, filling the cracks in the walls with gold. In the dream, the longhouse feels weightless, floating above the earth like a heartbeat made visible. You hear laughter again, free and unburdened, and realize it's your own. When you wake, the air smells different, cleaner, warmer, almost soft. Morning has come early, the horizon blushing pink beyond the cliffs. The world hasn't changed much. The sea still moves, the wind still hums, but something in the rhythm has shifted. You step outside, and the snow under your boots feels lighter, the kind that melts when you breathe on it. The first signs of thaw. Brynja joins you at the doorway, her shawl trailing in the wind. Spring doesn't rush, she says, eyes on the sky. It creeps in like forgiveness. She looks at you then, the corners of her mouth lifting. We've kept the fire, that's enough. Inside, the others wake one by one, stretching, yawning, starting the day's small tasks. The smell of bread rises again. Someone laughs at something trivial. The longhouse hums with quiet energy. Fragile, human, stubborn. Outside, the frost begins to drip from the roof in slow, shining beads. The sea, still vast and unknowable, rolls against the cliffs, but its voice has changed too. The morning note has softened into something closer to peace. You stand there a while, letting the wind touch your face, feeling its chill and its promise at once. The cold will return. It always does. But now you know it can be endured. You turn back toward the door, toward the warmth and the steady crackle of the hearth. Behind you, the waves keep their rhythm. Ahead, the firelight waits. Between them lies everything it means to be alive in this place. The courage to face what never ends, and the grace to rest when the wind finally quiets. The thaw begins not with warmth, but with sound. At first, it's only a trickle, a faint dripping from the eaves, a whisper of water slipping through ice. Then comes the soft crack of frozen layers loosening their grip, the slow sigh of snow collapsing on itself. You wake to it, the rhythm unfamiliar after months of silence. The longhouse feels different this morning. The air isn't biting. The fire burns slower, lazier. Even the smoke seems to rise with less struggle. You pull back the furs and step into a room that smells faintly of earth instead of frost. People are already stirring. The women scrape thawed mud from boots, laughing as one slips in a puddle near the door. The children chase each other outside without waiting for breakfast, their shouts echoing off the cliffs. After so much stillness, the noise feels wild, almost foreign. You catch yourself smiling. Outside, the world is dripping. Every roof edge, every branch, every rock sweats in thin silver threads of meltwater. The snow is still deep, but it no longer feels eternal. The sky is streaked with pale blue, and somewhere above the horizon, a faint warmth glows, more promise than presence. You close your eyes and feel it on your face. For the first time in months, the cold doesn't bite. It only lingers, uncertain of its place. Torvald's absence still hovers in the air, but it no longer feels like a wound, more like a shadow that follows the light. Brynja stands near the doorway, her shawl loosened, her hair unbraided. She watches the horizon with an expression caught between longing and relief. "He's gone where the ice goes," she says softly. "And maybe, like it, he'll come back different." You don't ask what she means. The thaw makes everyone speak in metaphors, as though the season itself demands poetry. The men are at work by the shore, hacking at the ice that still clings to the fishing lines. You help them lift the nets, heavy and dripping, out of the half-frozen water. Steam rises where cold meets sun. The nets come up full, mostly cod, a few herring, and something else tangled among them. A fragment of carved wood, smoothed by waves. It's a piece of an oar, you realize, its edge etched with runes too faded to read. The men glance at each other, uneasy. Brynja comes down to see, her eyes narrowing as she takes the fragment from your hands. "Old," she says finally. "Older than this house, maybe." She tosses it back into the sea. Let it finish its journey. Her gesture breaks the tension. Work resumes, laughter returning in brief bursts. The sound of axes and chatter mixes with the crash of waves. You watch the sea foam roll over the carved piece once more before it disappears. Maybe it's superstition, or maybe it's respect. But no one questions her decision. Back at the longhouse, the air hums with activity. Someone opens the shutters to let in sunlight, and the beam cuts through the smoke like a blessing. The light hits the wall where the iron charms hang, making them gleam faintly gold. The fire looks different in daylight, less desperate, more companionable. Brynja brews something in a clay pot, the steam fragrant with herbs and honey. "For strength," she says, offering you a cup. The drink is bitter, thick, but it warms you from the inside. "We'll need it," she adds. The thaw's kind, but it always asks a price. You don't ask what that means, though you suspect she's right. Historians often write about Viking endurance, their ability to survive brutal winters with little more than faith in their own resilience. But living it, even in imagination, shows something subtler. It isn't just strength, it's attention. The way they notice the shift in air before the sky changes, the sound of snow before it melts, the silence before a storm breaks. Survival here isn't only muscle, it's listening. The children return from outside, faces red and dripping, arms full of early wild greens sprouting near the rocks. They're small, tender things, fragile but stubborn, their roots somehow finding life in the thawing soil. The sight makes everyone laugh. Brynja takes a handful and tosses it into the stew pot, muttering a blessing. "For spring," she says, "for those who stayed." By evening, the air smells of wet earth and smoke. The longhouse doors stay open longer than usual, letting in light and the faint sound of water running down from the hills. The sea has softened too, its surface rolling slow and lazy against the rocks. You can almost imagine the coast breathing again. As dusk deepens, the sky glows copper over the fjord. Brynja sits beside the door, humming her quiet songs, her fingers tracing patterns in the air. "Winter leaves," she murmurs, but it never apologizes. You glance at her, unsure if it's meant as comfort or warning. Maybe both. The warmth creeps into your bones, but it carries with it a strange sadness, like saying goodbye to something that kept you alive even as it tried to kill you. The fire crackles gently. Outside, the last frost slides from the roof in a single delicate sheet that shatters on the ground with a sound like applause. You close your eyes and listen. For the first time in months, the longhouse breathes without effort. The walls, the people, even the sea, they all seem to exhale together, as if some great weight has finally lifted. That night, the air inside the longhouse is different. Looser, lighter, almost joyful. The fire burns smaller, but nobody minds. For the first time in what feels like forever, it isn't being fed out of fear. You sit with your back against a post, legs stretched toward the hearth, watching how the light flutters over the walls. Outside, you can hear the sea moving again. Alive and restless, but not angry. Someone has begun to sing. It's a simple tune. Half hum, half lullaby. An old seafarer's song passed from generation to generation. The kind meant to be sung with hands busy and heart steady. The words tell of a sailor lost to the northern lights who finds his way home by following the color of dawn. His wife waits by the fire every night until spring, when he returns, changed but smiling. The children listen wide-eyed, though they've heard it before. It's the kind of story people need to believe in once the thaw begins. Proof that loss isn't always forever. Brynja listens too, her face soft in the glow. When the song ends, she chuckles quietly. In the old days, she says, we'd carve new ships when the ice broke, small ones for the spirits. We'd set them on the water with candles inside to carry away what winter left behind. She looks toward the open door, where the night glimmers faintly with the reflection of melting snow. Maybe we should remember that. The idea spreads through the room like heat. Within an hour, everyone is working. Children fetching scraps of wood, women melting tallow for candles, men carving rough shapes with knives and steady hands. You help where you can, whittling a small hull from driftwood. The smell of resin fills the air, sharp and sweet. Each ship is a little different, some crude, some beautifully detailed, but all of them carry the same purpose: farewell and gratitude. When the candles are ready, Brynja lights the first one, her wrinkled fingers trembling but precise. The flame catches and steadies, small and perfect. For the winter we survived, she whispers. The others follow her outside, each holding a ship cupped carefully in both hands. The air is crisp, cold enough to remind you that spring isn't fully here, but no longer cruel. The moon hangs low and wide over the sea, painting the water in soft silver. One by one, the ships are placed into the tide. They bob gently, their little flames flickering like stars that have lost their sky. The current carries them outward, slow and sure. You watch as the light of each one grows smaller, merging with the glittering reflection of the moon. No one speaks. There's nothing left to say. The only sound is the quiet lap of waves and the low hum of wind through the rocks. After a while, Brynja leans close and murmurs, "Look carefully. The sea's keeping them." And she's right. None of the flames go out. The tide lifts them, carries them past the breakers, and for a moment, the whole horizon glows faintly gold, as if the sea itself were lit from within. Historians sometimes write about these rituals as curiosities, evidence of ancient superstition or pagan endurance. They note the practicality, the offering of candles, the symbolism of light over darkness. But what they can't capture is this feeling, standing shoulder to shoulder with others who've suffered the same cold, watching small flames drift into the endless dark, knowing they carry a piece of you with them. It isn't worship, it's release. When the last flame vanishes into the night, everyone turns back toward the longhouse. The laughter returns slowly, quiet but real. Inside, the fire still burns, waiting. Brynja sits first, sighing as she lowers herself onto her bench. "Now," she says, "we rest." You sit beside her, watching the fire's reflection dance in her eyes. The warmth spreads again, but this time it feels deeper. Something earned, not borrowed. "Do you think the sea forgives us?" you ask quietly. Brynja chuckles. "The sea doesn't forgive," she says. "It forgets, and that's kinder." You stay awake long after the others sleep, listening to the gentle creak of the beams, the sigh of the waves outside. The air smells faintly of tallow and salt, of extinguished flame and thawed earth. You think of the candles drifting out there somewhere, their light swallowed by distance but not gone. Maybe this is how the Vikings found peace, not in conquering storms, but in learning to let them pass. The night deepens, the stars shift overhead, the fire hums softly, its glow steady against the dark. And you realize this is the first time you've felt truly warm, not from the flames, but from knowing you've survived something immense and left it behind without forgetting. Outside, the sea breathes slower now, as if settling into sleep. The world has changed shape again, softer at the edges, filled with new promises. Tomorrow, there will be work, nets to mend, boats to patch, fields to clear. But tonight belongs to the thaw, to the quiet between seasons, to the sound of water remembering how to move. The morning after the candle ritual breaks like glass, bright, sharp, and startling. Sunlight floods the longhouse for the first time in what feels like a lifetime. It's thin and new, fragile as spun gold, but it finds every corner, every crack, every face turned toward it. You wake to its touch on your eyelids, the warmth faint but steady. Outside, the air hums with motion, the dripping of meltwater, the shuffle of boots, the sigh of wind no longer cruel. The world smells different. The air carries hints of wet moss and thawed soil, of smoke mingling with something green, alive. You step outside barefoot, curious, and the ground shocks you. Not frozen, not soft, but something in between, like skin waking from sleep. Every sound is sharper. The gulls calling overhead, the low groan of the tide, the whisper of wind through dripping pine. Down by the shore, the men are pulling boats free of the ice. The hulls creak as they move, wood moaning like it's remembering how to float. You help push one forward, your shoulders straining as it slides across the slush, then catches the water with a soft, triumphant slap. The tide lifts it slowly, rocking it in rhythm, as though testing its strength before letting it go. Everyone cheers, but the sound is humble, almost reverent. This isn't victory, it's return. Brynja watches from the path, her shawl billowing in the breeze. The sunlight turns her grey hair almost silver. They'll go soon, she says, not unkindly. The sea will call them again, and they'll answer. You look out at the men checking ropes, their laughter bright against the waves, and you understand what she means. Rest is only ever borrowed here. You wander along the edge of the cliff, where frost still clings in stubborn patches. The sea below is alive again, its surface restless, no longer bound by ice. You can see streaks of darker water where the current moves fastest, where winter's grip has truly broken. The rhythm of it pulls at something inside you, a reminder of motion after too long in stillness. You find yourself breathing with it, your chest rising and falling in time to the tide. Half buried in the wet sand near the rocks lies something small, a bone comb, half splintered, its teeth worn smooth by time. You pick it up carefully, turning it in your hands. It's carved with a pattern you almost recognize, a looping braid, simple but elegant. You imagine some woman, long dead now, running it through her hair by firelight centuries ago, perhaps whispering to her reflection in a bronze mirror. Objects outlive their stories, but they never lose their touch. You bring it to Brynja. She studies it for a long moment before smiling faintly. It's good luck, she says, a gift from someone who remembers beauty even in hunger. Then she presses it back into your palm. Keep it. The sea doesn't give twice. Later, as the sun climbs higher, the longhouse bursts into movement. The doors are thrown wide open. Bedding is dragged outside to air in the light. The smell of smoke and wool mixes with the freshness of thawing earth. The children help sweep out ashes from the hearth, laughing as the soot swirls around them like black snow. Even the dog seems reborn, bounding through puddles, barking at shadows. Historians often romanticize these moments of Viking spring, as if they marked clean beginnings after months of darkness. But what they miss is the exhaustion that follows survival. The people don't rejoice because the worst is over. They rejoice because they still can. Every thaw carries memory, the ghosts of nights when warmth felt like a rumor. Watching them now, you realize that joy here is quieter, steadier. It's not celebration, it's relief made visible. You sit on a rock overlooking the bay, watching steam rise from the wet earth. A group of men patch sails with strips of linen, their movements precise, rhythmic. The wind catches one unfinished sail, and for a moment, it billows wide, shining white against the blue sky. The sight makes your throat tighten. The world, for all its cruelty, always finds a way to remind you that it can still be beautiful. Brynja joins you, lowering herself slowly beside you. Every spring, she says, we think we'll never forget winter, but we do. We have to. She picks up a pebble and tosses it toward the sea, where it skips once before sinking. If we remembered everything, we'd never go back out there again. The tide laps gently below, patient and endless. You look at her, at the light softening the deep lines of her face, and you think she's right. Forgetting isn't failure, it's survival. The sea demands amnesia from those who love it, the same way the winter demands strength from those who endure it. You close your eyes, listening to the rhythm of the waves, and for a fleeting second, it sounds almost like breathing. By the second day of thaw, the coast hums with sound. The world that had been silent for so long now chatters, cracks, and breathes in every direction. The streams that had slept beneath layers of ice awaken, whispering down slopes and filling the air with a music that feels ancient and new at once. You help repair a fishing net with the others, your fingers clumsy at first, but learning. The hemp fibers scrape against your skin, rough as bark, but there's something soothing about the repetition. Knot, loop, pull, knot. The rhythm becomes its own kind of prayer. Around you, voices rise and fall in easy cadence. Someone tells a joke about frostbitten toes and forgotten lovers. Laughter echoes across the shore, carried by wind that no longer bites. The sun climbs higher, and for the first time in months, the scent of brine is joined by another smell. Seaweed drying, fish sizzling, smoke drifting from outdoor fires. The air feels alive, thick with work and memory. You glance toward the sea, where small boats rock against the thawed water. Their sails, patched and crude, bloom like white petals against the grey-blue horizon. The ocean is restless but not cruel. It's testing again, asking who among them still remembers its language. Brynja stands on the path above, a figure of quiet authority. She carries a small bundle wrapped in wool. "Offerings," she says when you ask. "We give thanks before taking again." She unwraps the cloth to reveal a handful of dried herbs and a small bronze coin, worn smooth by countless fingers. You follow her down to the waterline, where she scatters the herbs into the waves, then drops the coin. The sea swallows both without ceremony. "The gods don't bargain," she says, "but they listen." Historians debate whether Vikings believed their offerings truly reached the divine, or if the acts themselves were what mattered. Tokens of gratitude, not superstition. Watching Brynja now, you understand that the difference doesn't matter. Belief isn't about proof, it's about continuity. The ritual links one heartbeat to another, one winter to the next. It's how people keep from unraveling. Later, as the sun dips low, everyone gathers around the fire outside. It's a rare thing to sit in open air again. Smoke rises freely into the evening sky, where gulls wheel and cry against the dying light. The conversation flows easily. Talk of crops, of repairs, of what to trade when the next ship arrives. Hope threads through every word, tentative but real. Someone asks Brynja if the sea's song will return next winter. She stirs the fire with a stick, watching the sparks leap upward. "Always," she says. "But it doesn't come for everyone, only for those who listen too hard." She looks at you when she says it, her eyes unreadable. You feel the weight of her meaning and nod. You did listen, you always will. As night falls, the air cools but doesn't sting. The stars come out sharp and white, mirrored in the calm water. The tide slides in and out with a slow, patient rhythm. The sound of it fills you, steady, endless, forgiving. You close your eyes, breathing in the salt and smoke, and realize that the cold no longer owns you. It's part of you, yes, but it no longer defines you. Inside, the longhouse waits, its walls warm, its roof whispering softly under the wind. When you step back through the door, the fire greets you like an old friend. People are already settling into their places, murmuring prayers, trading one last story before sleep. Brynja nods to you from her corner. Her eyes are half closed, her voice a low murmur as she says, "We'll dream of sunlight tonight, and maybe you will. Maybe you'll dream of ships sailing through thawed waters, of the first green shoots breaking through snow, of laughter carried over the sea. Maybe you'll dream of Torvald, walking across a sunlit horizon, his boots dry, his heart quiet. The night deepens. The flames shrink to embers, pulsing like tiny stars. Outside, the tide keeps its rhythm, the same rhythm that's carried you from darkness into light. You breathe with it, slow, even, alive. For the first time since this began, you understand what it means to rest without fear. The world, now fully awake, seems to hum underfoot. The snow is gone from the paths, leaving behind slick ribbons of mud that glint gold under the sun. The air carries a new scent. Earth, salt, and something faintly sweet, like sap rising through thawed roots. You walk the length of the shore, your boots sinking slightly, feeling the soft give of soil that only weeks ago had been iron. Every step feels like proof that life endures through quiet rebellion. The longhouse stands proud against the cliffs, smoke coiling lazily from its roof. It no longer looks like a fortress fighting the cold, but a home ready to open its doors again. Children run past you, chasing each other with sticks, their laughter bright as gull cries. Women hang woven cloaks on lines outside to dry, the colours vivid. Ochre, rust, deep green. Even the goats seem restless with joy, stamping the ground as if to wake it further. Brynja is near the edge of the field, her shawl gone for the first time since you met her. Her hair, loose and silver, catches the light like wire spun by gods. She's kneeling, hands pressed into the thawed dirt. When she notices you, she smiles, her palms streaked with dark soil. "It's time," she says. "We plant before the wind forgets the scent of spring." You help her dig the first rows. The ground, though soft, still holds cold near its depths. Your fingers ache with the chill, but the ache feels clean, an honest kind of pain. You watch as Brynja drops seeds into the shallow furrows, each one a quiet promise. She murmurs something as she works. Not words you understand, but a rhythm you recognize. It's the same cadence as the sea's lull. the same whisper that's carried through every night since the first frost. As the day grows warmer, others join. The whole settlement bends to the work. Men, women, even children scattering seed in messy handfuls. The sky is endless and pale blue, dotted with thin clouds that drift like thought. The sun burns steady above, and the light seems to fill everything, even the spaces grief once held. When the last seed is covered, Brynja stands and brushes dirt from her hands. "Now we wait," she says, her tone both weary and content. You follow her gaze toward the horizon. The ocean glints like liquid steel, calm but alive, breathing in long, patient sighs. You can still see the faint line where winter once ruled, a darker band across the waves, but it's receding, fading into memory. Later, you sit together on the rocks overlooking the water. Brynja tells you about her youth, about the winters when the storms were so fierce that even the gods seemed to hide. "We used to say the sea was testing us," she says, "but I think it was teaching us instead, teaching us that warmth isn't given, it's made." She pauses, tracing the rim of a small shell she holds. "We built it ourselves. Every night, every fire, every laugh, the wind picks up, playing gently with her hair." You listen to the steady rhythm of the waves and realize she's right. The Vikings didn't survive by conquering nature. They survived by listening, by knowing when to endure, when to yield, and when to sing. Historians often reduce their winters to mere endurance tales, lists of rations and building techniques, but none of that explains the heartbeat of this place. The way the people draw strength from one another, the way they treat survival not as conquest, but as kinship. You feel it now, the invisible thread running through everything, the songs, the rituals, the simple act of sharing warmth. As the sun lowers, painting the sea copper, a faint sound rises from below, the gentle lap of waves against rock, steady and ancient. You lean back on your hands, breathing in the air, the salt, the warmth of the day. Brynja's eyes close, her lips moving in silent prayer. Not for protection, not even for thanks, just acknowledgement. When you open your eyes again, the horizon has turned gold. The wind is soft, carrying with it the scent of wet soil and far-off rain. The season has turned. The sea hums low, content for now. You realize that this peace, this stillness, is what all the struggle was for. Night will come again, and winter after that. But for now, the coast breathes easy. The longhouse glows steady, and the world feels wide enough to forgive. Evening unfolds slowly, soft and golden, as if the world itself is reluctant to close its eyes. The longhouse glows from within, its walls breathing out warmth and the scent of wood smoke. Outside, the tide retreats, leaving behind ribbons of silver foam that shimmer in the dying light. You walk alone along the water's edge, boots sinking into wet sand, each step releasing the faint sigh of the sea. The wind, once cruel, now moves like a sighing friend across your shoulders. Behind you, laughter spills faintly from the longhouse, low, human, alive. You can hear the rhythm of mugs clinking, the soft rumble of stories retold. The same walls that once held silence now pulse with life. Even the smoke escaping from the roof seems lighter, dancing upward into a sky blushing pink. You stop and look out across the ocean. Its vastness no longer feels threatening. The line between sky and water blurs, melting into one soft hue. You remember the nights when it had seemed endless, merciless, when the waves had sounded like teeth gnashing in the dark. But now, the sea looks tired, as though it too has earned a rest. Brynja's voice finds you even here. She stands by the door, a silhouette framed in gold. "It's strange," she says, "how the cold teaches us to love the small things." She gestures toward the horizon, where the first stars begin to bloom. A cup of warmth, a good story, the sound of breathing beside you. That's all any of us ever needed. You walk back to her side. The two of you watch as the last light dips beneath the waves, leaving behind a horizon still glowing faintly, as if holding on to its own memories. Inside, the fire crackles one last song before sleep. The furs are laid out. The children curl up without fear. The air smells of salt and smoke in safety. You lower yourself beside the hearth, eyes heavy, feeling the heartbeat of the sea through the floorboards. Somewhere far out in the dark, you imagine those candle ships from before, still drifting, tiny, eternal points of light, carrying whispers of every winter survived. You picture Torvald among them, steering quietly, his face calm in the moonlight. The thought doesn't hurt anymore. It feels like completion. Brynja murmurs something from her corner. Sleep easy, she says. The world will turn without your watch tonight. Her words wrap around you like a blanket. The fire sighs, the wind hums, the sea breathes. Everything finds its rhythm again. And now, as the longhouse dims to embers, let the world slow around you too. The storm has passed. The walls no longer creak from cold, but settle, content, their warmth pressed close to the hearts they sheltered. Outside, the sea folds into itself, soft waves curling over one another, whispering lullabies older than language. You can almost hear them, can't you? That low, soothing hum that moves like a heartbeat beneath everything. The same pulse that carried the Vikings through their brutal winters, that carried you through this one too. It says, rest now. Imagine the sky above the fjords, no longer heavy with snow, but scattered with slow, gentle stars. They blink over sleeping fields, over thawing soil, over ships rocking quietly in their moorings. Every flame that once burned in fear now burns in memory, calm and certain. You pull your blanket closer. The air around you feels safe, kind. The world outside the window may still be vast, untamable, but within this moment, there is peace. You've heard the sea's song. You've seen how even the harshest wind softens in time. And maybe, as you drift towards sleep, you'll carry that rhythm with you. The rhythm of waves and breath, of seasons turning, of warmth returning again and again. So breathe slow. Let your thoughts settle like snow melting on warm earth. The fire's glow fades, the air cools, and the hush deepens until all that's left is the sound of your own heartbeat, steady as the tide. The sea is calm now, the coast sleeps, and so should you.